Cool Figure TV. Revolutionary salute. Revolutionary salute. Like, share, subscribe. Welcome to the House of Revolution. You know I'm your humble host, the Yao Mean of Revolution. And I got some late breaking news the revolutionaries can use. 8:30 tomorrow night. 8:30 tomorrow night. Have your face in the place called Figure TV and ESG. We will be live right here in the House of Revolution. Be here. Share. Let everybody know. I want all y'all here tomorrow night live, 8:30. Me and a screwed up clique legend. We're going to be talking about it all right here on Core Figure TV. So that's just some late breaking news for y'all. Make sure y'all enjoy the show that's coming up tomorrow. But for tonight, Joe Biden and the Democrats, Kamala Harris, the War Party, the War Hawks, they're targeting free speech. It's not free anymore. You can be incarcerated. You could be thrown in the dungeon. See, Barack Obama, he started a lot of this. And the Congressional Black Caucus is nowhere to be seen as revolutionaries are being targeted.
The Biden administration is pushing to send 3 black activists to prison for 15 years for actively opposing his war. The DOJ is accusing the Uhuru 3 of pushing Russian propaganda because they advocate for peace and for global coexistence. If advocating for peace.
And I want y'all to remember this. When we're talking about, they're talking about people are Russian propagandists. Everybody know what I've been through with telling the truth here. With my Core Figure movement, we done lost several channels, but we keep going. We can't be stopped. We do know that, remember they said Dr. King was a Marxist communist who also worked for Soviet Union. Never forget that. And I would love to talk to the Democratic Party about how can you slander people in the same way Dr. King was slandered? How can you use the same bigoted talking points from the war hawks in the U.S. government that they use on our black revolutionaries like Fred Hampton and Huey P. Newton? Disgusting.
Is pushing the propaganda of your enemies, then you are the bad guy. This is the free speech trial of the century. Even if everything the United States is accusing the Uhuru 3 of doing, they have the right to do so under the First Amendment. Sowing discord in American politics is not a crime. You only believe so if you are a fascist. The DOJ claims the Uhuru 3 only believe what they do because it was paid and coerced by the Russian government. What an insult. Black Americans don't need Russia to convince us that the United States is a corrupt, criminal, warmongering country. Take it from me, I don't need Vladimir Putin to convince me that genocide Joe Biden is evil. There is a long history of the DOJ going after black activists and radicals for being too critical of the United States foreign policy. This is exactly why black radicals was warning against Russiagate from day one. It was obvious that Russiagate was created in order to create a fascist crackdown that would impact Black Americans first. Notice how the free speech right is completely silent on the free speech trial of the century. The fraudulent free speech right never actually cared about free speech. They just wanted to say racial slurs on social media. And the progressives like Bernie Sanders, AOC, hell, the entirety of the progressive media apparatus refuse to cover this because they don't want the supporters to know that they support an outright fascist political party.
They targeted the revolutionaries in the Uhuru movement, free those revolutionaries, but they don't want the truth about Ukraine out. You see, that the Democrats, they've been hand in hand with the neo-Nazis. Everybody know I taught that. I was one of the first black people on YouTube. You're not going to find anybody before me that's black was telling people it's neo-Nazis in Ukraine. That's a fact. They running from that. They back that. Now they trying to go after revolutionaries and say you a Russian puppet. Well, anybody fighting Nazis, I thought it was okay to be down with them. You see? Once again, those who really was with Hitler sides with him again against the Russians. But all our elders in the Democratic Party, the Congressional Black Caucus, have really exposed their hand. They really have exposed that they don't give a damn about no Dr. King. Dr. King would never went along with the war, with the standing with Nazis, trying to seize more territory in other people's part of the world. That's what the U.S. is trying to do. Dr. King wouldn't went along with that.
Really appreciated, my dear friend.
But going after
I want to talk to you about the suppression of free speech by the federal government, and what our friend and colleague Ray McGovern believes is acclimating Americans for a war. But before we get there, I just want to pick your brain a little bit on some of the more recent international developments. What's the latest on Kursk and on what's becoming of the Ukrainian troops there?
Well, I mean, again, just reflecting the reality that I'm thousands of miles distant from the battlefield, and thanks to U.S. sanctions, it's become more difficult to gain access to Russian sources who are intimately familiar. I can only go off of what's available. The Ukrainians are still in Kursk. The Russians have not driven them out. This is a political embarrassment for the Russian government, but it's not a strategic disaster. In fact, it's clear that Kursk is turning into a strategic disaster for the Ukrainians. In order to sustain their position, they've had to reinforce, the troops that are there, meaning that they're losing a lot of troops. They've lost, depending on some counts, 4,000 to 5,000, 6,000 soldiers. Now they're bringing in more, and they're suffering casualties as they go up. So Kursk is weakening rather than strengthening the Ukrainians. It's not weakening the Russians, who have not diverted meaningful forces away from their primary battlefield in the Donbass. So I think the Russians are happy to let this situation play out over time, and confident that at the end of the day, every Ukrainian who's currently in Russia will either end up dead, captured, wounded, or having been expelled. And most, if not all, of the equipment they've taken into Kursk with them, including the modern American tanks, German tanks, British tanks, infantry fighting vehicles, artillery, the billions of dollars of equipment that U.S. and European taxpayers provided to the Ukrainians, that will remain in Russia, destroyed or captured.
Wow. The attack on the military academy in Poltava, are you familiar with this bizarre tale of an American Army lieutenant colonel allegedly dying in Poland at the very moment of the attack in Poltava? The implication being he was one of the instructors and was killed there, but the Department of Defense is not going to admit where he was when he died. Does this make any sense to you? We know there were Swedish and Polish instructors among the dead with the cadets.
I mean, I'm familiar with the story. I'm also familiar with, disguising deaths. Back in the day when the Night Stalkers were getting off the ground, operational deaths would be disguised as training accidents. That's something you do with covert units and covert activities. There was no reason for this colonel to be at Poltava. It's not an American-driven training environment. The Swedes were there, getting the Ukrainians spun up on the airborne early warning and command and control systems. They were bringing in 2 Swedish aircraft and Swedish radars. So there's a significant Swedish delegation there. And then there were various contractors, maybe some active duty military personnel from NATO countries who were working with Ukrainians on drone operations, how to counter electronic warfare, how to make use of new technologies, etc. but there's no reason for an American to be there. And again, I think the American embassy would be very reticent about having Americans go off and expose themselves to this very incident. So I treat this particular report with a bit of skepticism.
If Americans were there, well, let me state it this way. Wouldn't Russian intel know who was there, whether they were Americans, Swedes, Poles, Brits, or Mossad?
I think the fact that Russia struck this facility at the time they struck this facility and achieved the results that they got by striking this facility means the Russians knew darn well what was going on there and who was doing it. So they would have known if there were Americans there, yes.
Okay. Switching gears to the topic of the interference with free speech. Chris, in chronological order, directly following each other, cuts 9, 10, and 18.
The subject matter and content of many of the videos published by the company were often consistent with Russia.
Now this is ridiculous. You know, it pisses me off so much because I don't know how they're gonna try to shut us down. But here they go once again talking about Russian interference in our elections, which is absolutely bullshit. The only people interfering with anybody and everybody's election is the U.S. It's not Russia. But what's disgusting is they're trying to shut down the people who have helped bringing us vital information and lock them up, like Scott Ritter, like the revolutionaries at the Uhuru movement, who going to Russia, talking to people, getting the vital information. The U.S. charged people, U.S. citizens who work for Russia Today. That's a news company saying Russia Today was paying. They got the dude Tim Pool on the internet. It's some Republicans too. They were saying they was getting paid to spew Russian propaganda, which is total freaking bullshit. But I'm gonna tell you what's so crazy about this, because they talking about Russian donations. Say somebody pop up in here and they get to donating to the war chest. We don't know who they is or where they coming from. Then the U.S. government circle back and say, ha, we got you. You're being Russian funded. You have accepted Russian donations and you're spewing Russian propaganda. This is very dangerous what they're doing, but it's meant to stop the truth and anybody telling it.
Russia's interest in amplifying U.S. domestic divisions in order to weaken U.S. opposition to core Russian interests, particularly its ongoing war in Ukraine. The company never disclosed to the influencers or to their millions of followers its ties to RT and the Russian government. Instead, the defendants and the company claimed that the company was sponsored by a private investor. But that private investor was a fictitious persona.
Nonsense.
The charges unsealed this morning do not represent the end of the investigation. It remains active and ongoing.
Our investigation revealed that since at least last year, RT has used people living and working inside the U.S.
This is
to
bullshit.
facilitate contracts
I'm
with
gonna
American
tell you
media
something.
figures.
We watch videos on here from the black brother Garland Nixon, and he teach revolutionary information about Russia, American elections, what's going on in the Middle East, what's going on in Europe. The brother, he has a RT program. Russia Today, they hire people. Because you know the U.S. and you talk with you give your understanding of politics. Like if Kofiger had a TV show on RT, that's disgusting, bro. And they saying that these people are spewing Russian propaganda. That's nonsense. Scott Ritter was working at RT. This is nonsense, man. What they doing? This is disgusting, bro. That's what I say. Ain't no free speech. They're trying to ship it. They're gonna scare the hell out of a bunch of content creators, man. Bunch of people gonna stop telling the truth because they gonna be like, damn, is it worth it? Hell yeah, it worth it, man. This revolution is a way of life.
Figures to create and disseminate Russian propaganda here. The content was pitched as legitimate independent news when in fact much of it was created in Russia by RT employees who worked for the Russian government.
Guess in their warped minds, there's an exception in the First Amendment for whatever the government characterizes as Russian propaganda. And I guess in their warped minds, they're both lawyers. One is the attorney general, the other is the head of the FBI. They forgot that the whole purpose of the First Amendment is to keep the government out of the business of evaluating the content of speech. You've been victimized by this.
Look, what they're saying is ridiculous. I just want to remind, when I graduated from college in 1984 with a Russian history major and then went into the Marine Corps as an intelligence officer because of my Russian specialization, the CIA was actively involved in doing a couple things. One, they would intercept and they would read the newspapers, the radio, the television broadcasts in Russia and translate them into English language and publish them in unclassified volumes. Why? So that everybody who was a specialist in Russia, everybody who had an interest in this, could read what the Russian press was saying, could hear what they were saying on radio and on TV. We never shied away from that. And this is 1984 when the KGB was involved in a frontal assault on America, trying to tip the scales of democracy against Ronald Reagan, whom they did not want to be reelected. So there was very active intelligence operations involved to influence the American election. And what did the CIA do? Build a wall to wall off Russian thought, Russian information? No, they said, here it is. Why? We weren't afraid of our skins back then. We were proud of who we were. We were confident in who we were. What you saw there with Merrick Garland and Christopher Wray are two men who have allowed their jobs, important jobs, to be politicized by the Biden administration, a Biden administration that is scared of its skin, scared of who America is. Notice what he said. He didn't say they made things up. He said they simply said there's problems in America. Well, guess what, Christopher Wray? Guess what, Merrick Garland? There are problems in America, and it's my duty and responsibility as an American to point these out, especially in an election year. This is insanity what they're doing. They are deliberately, it's not the Russians interfering in the election of 2024. It's the Department of Justice, it's the Attorney General, and it's the FBI and the FBI Director who are specifically getting involved to prevent any criticism of the Biden administration, anything that says everything ain't coming up smelling roses today in America. We got problems here, and maybe we want to fix it, and maybe the way to fix it isn't to reelect those people. I'm not saying that that's my position. I'm just saying that appears to be what Christopher Wray and Merrick Garland are scared of right now. This is, as you said, a frontal assault on free speech, a frontal assault on a free press. Why we're scared of anything that gets published by the Russians, I don't know. I'm an American. I'm not scared of anything, and I'm damn sure not going to let the opinion of a foreign country, even one that I think is okay, Russia, I'm not going to let it sway me whatsoever. The American people have an inherent ability to discern between fact and fiction. The American people are able to judge for themselves what's best for the people of America. And the idea that we're so stupid, we're so ignorant, we're so gullible that we're going to look at a video and say, oh, wow, I guess I'm going to change my vote. It's stupid. This is ignorance, and it's an insult to every American.
And it hurts. I mean, your home was raided, your property was violated, the privacy of your house was assaulted under pretext that we don't even know about.
No.
Dmitry Simes is a Russian who works for Russians in Russia, and he's been indicted for that because he also owns real estate in America and is also an American citizen who worked for 3 presidents of the United States, for gosh sakes. These guys will stop at nothing. It makes me wonder if there isn't some sort of an October surprise that's going to come if they think that the vice president is losing her race to former President Trump. Ray McGovern thinks that this is acclimating the American people for a war, either with Iran or with Russia.
I don't disagree with Ray. This is about the dumbing down of America. And let me just point something else out too. These indictments are based upon allegations, unproven allegations,
Right.
that are not going to be challenged. If you're a Russian or a Russian American who's not in the United States, you're not coming back to the United States to do that adversarial confrontation in a court of law. No Americans have been indicted as of yet. And according to some news outlets, they're probably not going to. Why? Because this is information warfare. This is the Justice Department putting out indictments that will be treated as fact by the mainstream media, by the American people, since they will go unchallenged. They did this in 2020, by the way, when they, if you remember, Concord, it was a company in Russia accused of running bot farms.
Right.
Ran it. And they did that, but Concord did something different. They challenged it. And you know what the Justice Department ended up having to do? Drop the case, because it couldn't withstand an adversarial challenge. And so here's what I'm trying to tell your audience. If most of these charges were challenged, they'd have to be dropped, because they're flimsy as hell.
I would think they would be dropped before they even got to a jury, because all of this is speech. All of this is absolutely protected speech, whether it's speech that Merrick Garland thinks Vladimir Putin wants us to hear, whether it's hate speech, whether it's offensive speech, whatever it is, it's speech. It's absolutely protected. Not to be outdone and not to raise your blood pressure. Here's Baghdad Bob weighing in, number 11, Chris.
Actors like Iran and Russia are at it again and continue to believe that it somehow suits their interest to interfere in our electoral process. So we're here because of what they've been doing, and that we're trying to hold them accountable and to make it harder for them to do this. And that's exactly what the actions today, and I'm sure actions to come as appropriate, will do. We'll make it harder for them. Will it make it?
These people want Americans to hear no information from no other countries. They want us to only hear what they say, and the paid propagandists who work for them and who they allow to talk around YouTube. That's crazy. This is disgusting. These people talk about this is the land of free speech. Here, you get all the information. What is disgusting? This is disgusting. And they're trying to clamp down around election time. They want Kamala to win. They want the American people to back war with Venezuela, Iran, Russia, China, Korea, every damn body. These people is out of their mind, and they lost to the Taliban.
Completely impossible? Probably not, because they'll find workarounds. I mean, these are actors, in this case, driven by the Kremlin itself, that are bound and determined to try to change and influence the way Americans vote when they go in that ballot box. And that's why I said it at the end of my opening statement. Everybody, not just the federal government, but everybody needs to be concerned about this, and everybody needs to bear a hand.
Now, what's crazy, what's so disgusting is what he is charging, they trying to charge people with is what Israel do, to swear our elections. Israel and AIPAC openly defeated black congressional people who went against the war in Gaza, openly threw their money. And Russia could never do that. It'll be World War III. Russia tried this. They're saying the Russians is trying to do something, and they're indicting people and threatening, making threats. But Israel openly do it, and these bastards won't say a mumbling word about Israel openly having all our politicians kiss their ass, bow down to them, have a war criminal like Bishop Netanyahu in our house, the House of Congress, standing there like a dictator while they clap like puppets for him. Most claps in history. Guinness Book of World Records, they sitting there clapping. Damn shoe. And the Congressional Black Caucus, they went to the Guinness Book. Most shoes shined in one setting in history that day in the congressional place where Benjamin Netanyahu was at. The Congressional Black Caucus in there shining their shoes.
And pushing back on the influence attempts by Russia.
You know, Admiral Kirby makes the Attorney General and the FBI Director actually seem rational by comparison. He is really, really off the deep end. I sort of feel sorry for him. Because this is indefensible, what he's saying and what he's trying to defend. Before we jump onto Secretary Austin, do you have any thoughts on this? This is the same nonsense over and over again. He just threw Iran in.
I'll just stick on the Russia angle of it.
Give me a break.
And I'll help you make some breaking news here. I don't know if anybody will pick up on this, but
good.
You know, in back when I was planning to go, I did go to Russia in December. You were going to come with me, but you had some issues that precluded that. I had submitted a request to interview Vladimir Putin and Dmitry Medvedev, actually to have us interview them.
Right.
And the response I got back after an initial "we'll consider it" was the decision has been made at the highest level not to allow interviews because they didn't want to get involved, be seen as getting involved in American politics during an election year. Now, then they turned around and allowed Tucker Carlson to come in and interview the president, which makes that declaration somewhat spotty. But my point is, my experience has always been that the Russians take an extremely hands-off position on this. I interviewed Anatoly Antonov, who's the ambassador, and he took it a step further. He said, "Look, the number one requirement for Russia, in terms of what they want, is predictability. So we don't care who's in the White House as long as they're predictable. We prefer someone who has predictable friendship, but a predictable enemy is better than somebody who we don't know where they're coming from, because it's hard to build policy around chaos." And the implication was, and at the time he made the statement, it was Biden and Trump, the clear implication was that the Russians were actually leaning towards Biden because he was predictable.
Right.
Because Trump is chaos. And so the reason why I bring that up is the entire underlying theme of Christopher Wray and Merrick Garland and others is that the Russians are trying to support Donald Trump, that they're in it to push the lever down in favor of Donald Trump. And I'm here to tell you right now, Donald Trump is the last person the Russians want in the White House because he's unpredictable.
Putin just came out and said that he support Kamala Harris. He said that.
Here's someone who is stupidly predictable. Cut number 2.
Ukraine continues to seize the initiative on the battlefield. Ukraine's troops are now conducting an operation in Russia's Kursk region. The Kremlin's army of aggression is now on the defensive on its own turf. But we know that Putin's malice runs deep. Moscow continues its offensive in the east of Ukraine, especially around Pokrovsk. Putin is repositioning his troops in Kursk. And the Kremlin continues to bombard Ukraine's cities and to target Ukraine's civilians. That is an outrage.
Kidding me? Bombarding cities and killing civilians is an outrage? How many billions in equipment have you, Lloyd Austin, sent to Benjamin Netanyahu to do exactly that? And isn't he doing exactly that even as we speak?
Well, he's also doing it with Ukraine by giving the Ukrainians weapons that are being used to target civilian areas inside Russia. Look, every civilian death in wartime is a tragedy. Unfortunately, war, especially modern war, there will be civilian casualties. This conflict right now, the civilian casualty to military casualty ratio is the lowest in modern history, which means that the concept of Russian indiscriminate bombing of the Ukrainian civilian population is not borne by the facts. And don't take my word for it, take the Washington Post and Human Rights Watch, organizations that are not pro-Russian at all. They've come out and said that many, if not most, of the civilian deaths that are happening in Ukraine are caused because the Ukrainian government uses Ukrainian civilians as human shields, putting military equipment in civilian areas, etc. So Lloyd Austin is just, off his rocker right now. And I just want to point out again to your audience, he sat there and made it sound as if Ukrainian forces on Russian soil is a good thing. It's a NATO and American motivated, organized, and led invasion of Russia. As we speak, the Russians are in the process of promulgating a new nuclear doctrine. This nuclear doctrine will lower the threshold for the use of nuclear weapons, I believe, and will also endorse and embrace a policy of nuclear preemption, meaning that if they feel that the United States, using a Ukrainian proxy, is going to use weapons, including non-nuclear weapons, to carry out strikes against Russian strategic command and control, that the Russians have a right to preempt such a strike using nuclear weapons and a target base that will not be limited to Ukraine. That's our future right now because of idiots like Lloyd Austin, because of idiots like Tony Blinken, because of idiots like Jake Sullivan and the President of the United States. Unfortunately, they are literally walking down a path of nuclear annihilation, and the American people are ignorant of it. And when people like me try to educate the American people about Soviet nuclear doctrine, which I get educated on by talking to Russians. I'm called a Russian asset, and they shut down my ability to interface with Russian experts. I mean, we at a moment in time when we the people must be empowered by knowledge and information. The U.S. government is making that empowerment criminal.
Seated next to Secretary Austin was President Zelensky. Chris, cuts number 1 and 3 back to back.
We need to have this long-range capability not only on the occupied territory of Ukraine, but also on the Russian territory. Yes, so that Russia is motivated to seek peace. Putin wants more Ukraine to occupy than he wants security for Russia. He doesn't care about Russian land and people. He just wants to grab as much of our land and as many of our cities as possible.
How unseemly is it for him to be asking for offensive weaponry that could reach Moscow in public? This is not a phone call to Jake Sullivan. This is in public, seated next to the Secretary of Defense.
I wish the Secretary of Defense would have turned to Zelensky and said, you do understand that Russia's not at war with you. You do understand that, right? And you do understand the difference between a special military operation and war. The fact that you're sitting next to me, still alive, sort of is proof positive that Russia's not at war with you. So why do you want to go to war with Russia? Because at the end of the day, if Russia does go to war with you, your nation ceases to exist. You cease to exist. All of this ceases to exist. And that's really the stance the United States needs to take, but we're not going to. We play along with this game. We facilitate this madness. Hopefully at the end of the day, we'll say no to him because, as bad as the Biden administration is, I don't see them as being absolutely suicidal, and they know what the consequences will be. I can guarantee you that the Russians have communicated this using.
They're telling Zelensky to keep. I see. I don't know why Scott. You. I don't know, brother. Maybe the student is not a teacher, and the teacher's a student. Scott, listen to me. The U.S. military is telling Zelensky to come out in the open and keep asking to hit further into Russia. Let him hit further into Russia. Do you think Zelensky would just be doing this? They're telling him to do that so they can seem like, oh, Zelensky's pressuring us to do the right thing. Do everything Biden said he wouldn't give Zelensky, he has given it to him. There's nothing left but to allow him to attack further into Russia with those missiles, which Putin has warned them. If a missile come from the French, if it's a Scout, then we're going to hit you. If it's the British tourists, then we're going to hit Britain. If it's the American attack them, then we're going to hit America. So it's up. So it's up to them. He already told them it's up to them. So first country to say, okay, Zelensky, you can use our missiles to target deep into Russia. That's the country ass going to be grass. So that's the game the U.S. is playing. They are putting our life in danger. This is why Zelensky, I thought the F-16s was going to be, y'all going to teach Putin a lesson. Y'all got them. Now they're on to the next lie.
Using back channels, that this is a no mess around time. And if these missiles strike Russian command and control, there will be an immediate decisive response by the Russians, and nobody's going to like it.
Scott Ritter, thank you, my dear friend.
He already told them when he sent this missiles to Cuba. He already warned them. Whatever you let Zelensky do, then I'm gonna do it to y'all. See, but these people is nuts. That's why we gotta have some geopolitical information going on today, because it's up there all over the globe. Hold on, let's hear the man speak himself. Let's hear the big dog himself speak. I don't know how long we're gonna be able to hear the man speak for himself before they start shutting down any channel that play anything Putin say.
You have already said that Kiev may negotiate with Russia after the failure of its provocation in the Kursk region. And before that, were there any prospects for a peaceful settlement of the situation? We have already talked about this many times. We have reached almost all the parameters of a possible peace agreement with government representatives in Kiev. We have agreed on everything. Moreover, the head of the negotiating delegation, and he still heads the faction of the ruling party in the Rada, in parliament, He signed these agreements. Yes, there were still some things that needed to be finalized. But in general, their visa is there.
Think about these people trying to tell us, and the Greek freaks, to put Kamala Harris on the other side of a negotiating table with Vladimir Putin. That's the ad that Trump just need to put that. Is that what the America want? Kamala Harris versus Putin?
There, it is a document. Then Mr. Johnson arrived, as you know. The British authorities do not deny this, they confirm it. He arrived and gave the Ukrainians instructions to fight to the last Ukrainian, which is what is happening today. With the goal of achieving a strategic defeat of Russia. They are not succeeding. And the Ukrainian authorities publicly stated that if they had followed what we had agreed upon with them, if they had not listened to their masters from other countries, the war would have stopped long ago. But they took a different path. Now we see the result. Are we ready to negotiate with them? We have never refused to do so. But not on the basis of some ephemeral demands, but on the basis of the documents that were agreed upon and actually initialed in Istanbul.
You can't even get this on TV. You can't watch this on no news station will play this. Not CNN, not MSNBC, not Fox News, nowhere. Because they call it Putin propaganda. Anything Putin say, he's trying to trick you. Putin say they want peace. How about the documents that they signed? I keep telling people, Putin invaded, or not invaded, excuse me, Mr. Putin, you didn't invade. Putin went with a special military operation and no invasion. In February of 2022, the next month, Ukraine wanted peace. They were screaming peace alert. They stole my shit. They wanted peace. And then Britain stepped in and promised them the whole world. They could have the whole world if they just fight Putin. They can have all the glorious weapons. They can enter NATO. Just don't surrender. And that's why Ukraine got fucked up. And that's what Putin is saying. First of all, you know you will have to start with what you signed, any peace. The peace plan you signed in the beginning, where you would never, ever be able to enter NATO, where you only can have a certain amount of military in your country. You would never have no NATO weapons. You barely can have a military. I mean, Putin telling them, we're going to start there before to start anywhere. But the U.S. don't want the citizens to know because they want to say Putin never wanted peace. Putin laughing like, are you kidding me? I was talking peace in the beginning.
Is there an understanding of which country could become a mediator country this time? If negotiations take place in the future, well, we respect our friends, partners, who, as I believe, are sincerely interested in resolving all issues related to this conflict. First of all, these are the People's Republic of China, Brazil, India. I am constantly in contact with our colleagues on this issue, and I have no doubt that the leaders of these countries, we have a trusting relationship with them. They sincerely strive to help understand all the details of this complex process, which, of course, I want to remind you, began with the coup d'etat in Ukraine in 2014. After all, that's where it all began. They tell us all the time about human rights, about some principles of international law
They don't give a damn about that.
that everyone must comply with, and what is an unconstitutional bloody coup d'etat? What is it? This led to the fact that part of the country's population did not agree with the results and with this coup in general. They began to fight for their rights. Everything ultimately resulted in today's conflict. These are the reasons, but they prefer not to remember this. But we know the reasons.
Come on, man.
And
About the Nazis took over in 2014 with the help of Barack Obama. They don't want the U.S. citizens to know a democratically elected president was overthrown by the CIA. Putin, like, man, come on, man. What are we even talking about here? Why do American citizens don't understand what I'm doing here? Putin, because they won't let us hear you, brother. They shutting everybody down who try to push this truth. I'm deep down in my bunker right now, shooting this out across the world for everybody to hear.
of course, We will protect our interests and the interests of those people who are close to us and who are the bearers of the Russian language, Russian culture, Russian traditions, which, by the way, our guest today spoke about very vividly. Vladimir Vladimirovich, we all understand perfectly well that, in general, and you have just noted this, negotiations are possible not directly with Kiev, but with its Western curators. But in the event of negotiations, do you think we can trust them in the future? After all, if you look even at historical facts, Russia has been deceived, probably, more than once. These include the issues of NATO expansion to the east and the Minsk agreements. We did not violate them. Have we drawn conclusions? You understand. What other way is there? Yes, we understand who we are dealing with. These are people who do not value, who treat the interests of other countries and peoples without any respect. Such people, unfortunately, exist. They easily violate all the obligations they have taken on, even sign documents. But what can we do? We just need to look for such forms and such guarantees. That would at least somehow, to some extent, work. But the main guarantee of our security is the growth of the economy and military potential of the Russian Federation itself. These are reliable and stable relations with our partners and allies. You said that we failed to reach an agreement in Istanbul with the mediation of President Erdogan, but in fact, we managed to reach an agreement.
This man right here is the only thing standing in the way of the whole world. Kids having to transition and boys being in girls' bathrooms and girls being boys. He outlawed that and he's standing against that. He's standing for the traditional family. Remember, one of the sins of Vladimir Putin, the West really got hot, is when he he opened the vaults and showed the pictures of the black saints. Nobody, that went all over YouTube. I was the first person to put them videos up. But nobody even talking about that stuff. Nigga, I showed that shit a year before everybody else was even watching that. That's a fact. It's other brothers on here who were doing historical documents and they was doing stuff, but the majority of the people, I was the first person talking about those black saints on there and Russia, period. But they can't have that. See, Putin know everything, know a lot, know who's not who, and he know who he really is fighting against. We can't really talk about that kingdom that start with a K. You know how you two go after you if you talk about that kingdom that start with a K, but it's in the land, it was in the land that Ukraine is in right now. And the Russians forced them to choose a side. And they chose what? Judaism? Come on, man. Y'all don't know the story? That man is standing in the way.
That is the whole trick. This is also evidenced by the signature of the head of the Ukrainian delegation, which initialed this document, which means that the Ukrainian side was generally satisfied with the agreements reached. This document did not enter into force only because the Westerners did not give them the order to implement it, and the elites of the United States, the elites of some European countries had a desire to achieve a strategic defeat of Russia. They thought that they would now take advantage of the situation and bring Russia to its knees, dismember it, or do something else that they were planning to do. They thought that manna from heaven would fall upon them at any moment, that they would now achieve their strategic goals, which they had been striving for, perhaps, for centuries or decades. These are the reasons Johnson came and told them, no need. You have got to fight to
that manna will come down from heaven and rain upon them. Come on, man. You got to catch this. You got to catch what he's saying here. The reference he used, he's speaking to the writing revolutionaries. Man, them people pissed. They don't want him using biblical references when he talks. That's serious business.
To the last Ukrainian. That is why they are still fighting. Sometimes I get the impression that those who govern Ukraine are as if they are aliens or foreigners. In fact, they simply do not think about anything. No, I'm serious. You understand, they have colossal losses. What will they do next? I don't even understand. They need to lower the draft age again now, to recruit children, like the Nazis did in Germany, to create the Hitler Youth. But that won't solve the problem. This is such a total and widespread mobilization. Such a total mobilization is already taking place there, but their next step is to call up students for military service, and so on, completely bleed the country dry. I repeat once again, it seems that these are not their people. Actually, it's clear. The relatives of the members of the ruling elite mostly live abroad. They got on a plane and flew away, and that
Hell no, it's not their people. Zelensky is not the Nazis. The Nazis is fighting for Zelensky. Everybody knows Zelensky is Jewish. Hell no, it's not their people. Soros and them done stepped in. Come on now, BlackRock, the CEO is a small hat. Hell no, those Ukrainians really not their people, but that's really Soros and them land.
That's the end of it. They don't think about the country.
Mythological Israel should be in Ukraine.
They only hide behind nationalist slogans. That's all. They are fooling people. But, I repeat once again, if they really have such a desire to negotiate, then we will not refuse. But on the basis of those agreements that were reached and recorded in Istanbul.
Against the backdrop of the rapidly deteriorating situation of the armed forces of Ukraine on the battlefield, the head of the Kiev regime, being at the U.S. airbase east of the German city of Ramstein, demanded from his so-called Western allies a significant increase in military support for the Ukrainian army. Speaking to NATO and Pentagon generals, the head of the Kiev regime called on the West to help Ukraine end the current conflict this fall. At the same time, Zelensky was not talking about diplomatic ways to resolve this conflict, but about obtaining permission from the West to use long-range missiles against the territory of the Russian Federation. Moreover, the head of the Kiev regime also demanded that the West increase supplies of American F-16 fighter jets to Ukraine. According to him, the F-16 fighter jets are allegedly very effective in the fight against Russian unmanned aerial vehicles and missiles. Zelensky noted that Ukraine needs very large quantities of these combat aircraft to achieve its goals. At the same time, the head of the Kiev regime, for some reason, decided not to touch the topic of the recent loss of one of the supplied F-16 fighter jets, which was destroyed during its attempt to intercept Russian ballistic and cruise missiles. My friends, let me remind you that on August 26, during a massive Russian missile attack on military facilities and the energy infrastructure of Ukraine, the Air Force of this Eastern European country lost its first F-16 fighter jet, along with an experienced combat pilot, Lieutenant Colonel Alexei Mess. The deceased pilot with the call sign Moonfish was considered one of the most experienced and best combat pilots in Ukraine. In addition, he perfectly knew English and therefore piloted the F-16 fighter at a very high level. Against this backdrop, the first official reports from the Kiev authorities that the F-16 crashed as a result of pilot error, were immediately questioned by world military experts and analysts. Later, the deputy of the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine, Mariana Bezeglaya, also added oil to the fire. In particular, she bluntly stated that the F-16 fighter was destroyed in the sky over Odessa as a result of friendly fire from the combat crew of the American Patriot air defense missile system. Speaking to reporters, Mariana Bezeglaya blamed the top Ukrainian generals for what happened. According to her, high-ranking officers of the armed forces of Ukraine, including Lieutenant General Nikolai Olszczuk, are engaged in spreading lies and propaganda instead of effectively confronting the enemy on the battlefield. However, the statement of a high-ranking Ukrainian politician that the F-16 fighter was allegedly destroyed by friendly fire from the combat crew of the American Patriot air defense missile system was also questioned by many world experts and analysts. The fact is that the Western air defense systems located on the territory of Ukraine are equipped with a friend or foe system, and therefore the combat crew of the American Patriot air defense missile system could not destroy the F-16 fighter in the sky over Odessa. The fact that the Ukrainian General Staff and NATO still refuse to release data from the flight recorders of the American F-16, along with photos from the crash site, indicates that this fighter jet was destroyed by a Russian missile from an air defense system or combat plane. This fact was also confirmed by official representatives of the Turkish intelligence community. A few days ago, they officially announced that the American F-16 was destroyed by the Russian fifth-generation fighter jet Su-57. At the same time, they stressed that the F-16 was destroyed with the help of aircraft missile or 37M, which the Su-57 launched from the airspace of the Crimean Peninsula. Surprisingly, a few days after this statement by the Turkish side, the influential American newspaper, The Wall Street Journal, citing its own sources in the Pentagon, said that the F-16 fighter jet crashed after an air-to-air missile exploded in its vicinity. Thus, the American newspaper indirectly confirmed the fact that the F-16 was destroyed by a Russian fighter jet. Influential Russian telegram channels have also conducted their own investigation into the crash of the American F-16 fighter jet. Referring to their own sources in the Russian Defense Ministry, they bluntly stated that the F-16 was indeed destroyed by the Russian fifth-generation fighter jet Su-57. At the same time, they noted that the Su-57 struck the American fighter jet not from the airspace of the Crimea, but being in the sky of the Bryansk region. According to them, the Su-57 closely monitored the movement of the F-16 in the airspace of Ukraine, and hit it with an R-37M missile at the most appropriate moment. It is reported that this missile exploded 20 meters from the F-16, causing serious damage to the fighter jet, as a result of which the pilot had to maneuver at a low altitude, which was the reason for the crash of this combat aircraft. However, the bad news for the Kiev regime did not end there. A few hours ago, an authoritative Russian military expert, Mikhail Pavlov, made a sensational statement. In particular, he stated that on August 26, 2024, during a massive Russian missile attack, Ukraine lost 2 F-16 fighter jets. According to him, while the whole world was discussing the destruction of the F-16 fighter in the sky over Odessa, non-public information appeared that on August 26, Russian ballistic missiles destroyed another F-16, this time in the city of Starokostiantynov. Mikhail Pavlov noted that on that day, Russian ballistic missiles destroyed one American F-16 fighter jet and several Soviet-style combat aircraft at the Starokostiantynov military airbase. According to Mikhail Pavlov, it was the destruction of the F-16 fighter jet at the Starokostiantynov military airbase that was the main reason for the dismissal of the Ukrainian Air Force commander, General Nikolai Olszczuk. The fact is that Lieutenant General Nikolai Olszczuk was personally responsible for covering military airfields in central and western Ukraine with air defense systems. The fact that Russian missiles managed to destroy the F-16 fighter at the Starokostiantyniv military airbase, which was surrounded by dozens of air defense systems around the perimeter, became a personal fiasco for Lieutenant General Nikolai Olszczuk. By the way, insiders in Kiev claim that Vladimir Zelensky did not want to dismiss Lieutenant General Nikolai Olszczuk from the post of Ukraine's Air Force commander. However, the fact that Ukraine lost 2 F-16 fighters in one day made the West mad. And the head of the Kiev regime had to justify himself to his main sponsors, as a result of which Zelensky had to dismiss Lieutenant General Nikolai Olszczuk from the post of Ukraine's Air Force commander, and appoint General Anatoly Krivonazko in his place.
The assault troops of the armed forces of Ukraine flee in disarray, abandoning their weapons and ammunition on the front lines, during the liberation of Prikostovka by the Russian armed forces. On September 4, 2024, the Russian Defense Ministry officially confirmed the liberation of the village in South Donetsk by soldiers of the 40th Marine Brigade, the 155th Marine Brigade, and motorized riflemen of the Eastern Military District. 3 soldiers of the 155th Marine Brigade confirmed live on video their victory on the battlefield, successfully driving Zelensky's expired men out of Prikostovka. Ukrainian military analyst Deep State, which is connected to Ukrainian main intelligence directorate, acknowledged the loss of Prikostovka by the end of September 3, that Russian forces had captured the remaining western part of Prikostovka and established control along a forest strip stretching for 3.4 kilometers. A few days ago, Russian Marines were reported to have advanced and broken through the Ukrainian defenses in this village. Assault troops from Buryatia or eastern Siberia cleared the village, attacking the Ukrainian formation's stronghold, which was a key part of the Ugledar group's defenses. Drone footage showed an armored assault detachment of the 5th Tank Brigade and the 40th Marines, involving about 10 infantry fighting vehicles of various types and a motorcycle squad, charging in large numbers against the Ukrainian group. The armored troops closed in, then dismounted infantry were seen attacking the Ukrainian trenches at close range, shaking off enemy troops in their hideout in Prikostovka, which has now been taken. During the liberation of the village, drone footage from the 40th Marine Brigade captured the moment when Zelensky's remaining troops fled in panic to save their lives. The mass desertion of Ukrainian units of the 58th Separate Motorized Infantry Brigade and infantry formations of the 68th Jaeger Brigade was recorded, rapidly retreating towards Zolotaya Niva and likely taking advantage for a few days. Establishing control over Prikostovka would ultimately cut off the supply of the Ukrainian fortified area of Ugledar, and a large-scale attack on it would be imminent.
My friends, it seems I won't be able to catch a break as war is looming in the South China Sea. The aggressive posturing of China increases the likelihood
US
of a
don't want to
cross-strait
vote with China.
conflict occurring in the next few years. And knowing the scales of wars in Asia, this next battle for Taiwan could make the Russia-Ukraine war look like a warm-up. The latest Chinese show of force around Taiwan was a wake-up call for the United States. As the US deployed its naval assets away from Taiwan, on May 23, 2024, China conducted a large-scale military exercise called Joint Sword 2024A, involving dozens of warships and over 100 aircraft all around Taiwan. China says war games around Taiwan to test the ability to seize power. Many Chinese People's Liberation Army officials believe, I quote, the liberation by force of Taiwan, as well as war with the United States, inevitable. Some say within the next 5 years. Meanwhile, the Taiwanese soldiers are getting the fireworks ready for their liberation by force.
Do you really think you have a chance against us, Mr. Cowboy?
Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker.
For China, from a geostrategic perspective, the takeover of the Republic of China, aka Taiwan, is a must in order to secure its access to the Pacific and thus secure its trade routes, but also to finally claim bubble teas as their own invention. Whether we talk about a naval blockade all around the island of Taiwan or a full-scale amphibious invasion, China must make sure its naval capabilities are up for the task. On the other hand, the latest military exercises also reveal the limits and weaknesses in the PLA's operational capabilities and galvanize surrounding countries to form a military alliance with the United States. With that being said, we have to admit that China's 2024A exercise was so skillfully planned and coordinated. We could think Chinese warships used some sort of VPN to camouflage their entire operation. This video is sponsored by Private Internet Access. Private Internet Access is a VPN that provides you with extra privacy online and that lets you virtually connect anywhere, or like the Chinese call it, Sharp Sword 2024A, was most likely triggered by the inauguration of the incoming pro-independence Taiwanese president Lai Ching-te, which happened 3 days before the exercises. We remember how the Chinese military also carried out large-scale exercises when the US Speaker of the House at the time visited Taiwan. This means China has this habit of conducting military exercises around Taiwan in times of political importance. However, what was striking with the latest exercise of the Chinese Navy is how its deployment was executed with speed and secrecy. That's the most important thing to remember about this operation, some sort of Chinese maskirovka. No media reports were published about the upcoming 2024A exercise in both mainland China and foreign countries. No trailers, no announcements, no TikTok videos, nothing. That's how, all of a sudden, at 8 a.m. on the 23rd of May, right when the RRC finished deploying one of its Chongfeng 2 anti-ship missiles, PLAN frigates sailed to positions 60 kilometers from Taipei, the capital of Taiwan. This naval exercise is not a standalone drill. Instead, it is part of a series of military exercises from the past and into the future. They will simulate and formulate the optimum deployment pattern to successfully capture all ROC territory. From a political perspective, it was also imperative to avoid Japan's economic waters, especially since their island chain is so close to Taiwan. And you don't want to hear this Batotai song approach from the horizon. In 2022, China announced the military exercise prior to the drills and published the planned exercise regions, whereas this year's exercise was executed without any prior warnings. The crazy part is how US intelligence was unable to detect this in advance. and thus make the appropriate deployments in response to the PLAN's exercise. We can see this from the diverted positions of two US carrier groups in the Asia-Pacific region. For example, in 2022, US task forces operated much closer to Taiwan during China's military exercise, whereas in 2024, the USS Ronald Reagan was sailing east of Japan, while the USS Theodore Roosevelt was located near Singapore. There's no way they would have been able to intervene in time if China was actually launching the invasion of Taiwan. This means the US Navy got completely fooled.
Is the poop deck really what I think it is?
So that was the ISR part, but let's take a look at the technical aspects of this military exercise. Something to take note is how this year is the first time the PLA has marked the region around Taiwan's outer islands, like Kinmen and Matsu near the Chinese coast, as military exercise zones. Another surprise is how the Chinese Coast Guard was involved in these drills, as they deployed around these islands, simulating amphibious assaults. For example, on the first day of the drill, 7 out of 19 ships belonged to the Coast Guard. This demonstrates two things. Number one, how the PLA is planning the capture of these islands to secure the supply lines between mainland China and Taiwan. Number two, the increased coordination between Coast Guard vessels with PLA forces to support military objectives. This is namely one of the biggest differences with the 2023 military exercises. The exercise region east of Taiwan was positioned much closer to Holian City, at just 60 kilometers off the coast compared to over 150 kilometers in 2022. This may suggest the preparation of an amphibious operation to capture this strategic city, which would act as a wedge between the closest Japanese island, Yonaguni, and Taiwan's east coast to blockade possible US supplies. Regardless of the likelihood of foreign intervention, the Chinese military is preparing for potential confrontation with the US and its allies, like Japan, South Korea, and the Philippines. Another important target in the sector would be the Jiashan Air Base, which has a vast tunnel structure in the mountains and a runway protected by the central mountain ranges to its west. This base can also withstand at least Richter 7 scale earthquakes and host up to 200 aircraft. Another exercise region in the southeast was wedged between Taiwan and the Philippines, thus severing routes from all foreign territorial islands in close proximity that can act as a supply node for US military aid to flow into Taiwan. On the western side of the island, there was a new exercise region, forming a reverse wedge formation to encircle and essentially besiege the Penghu Islands. This set of islands is extremely strategic, as it can act as a forward operating base and supply node for PLA Marines to storm the beaches on the west coast of Taiwan. So all this is providing us with very important clues as to what China is preparing. Step 1 could be the capture of all Taiwanese islands located right on the coast of mainland China. Meanwhile, the Chinese Navy will start the encirclement of Taiwan proper to prevent any foreign intervention. Step 2 will be the capture of the Penghu Islands, from where PLA forces can regroup and coordinate the main assault on the island. And step 3, the actual amphibious assault on the island of Taiwan, with a continuous stream of ferries going from the Penghu Islands to the main island of Taiwan. And honestly, this makes much more sense considering the limited amphibious capabilities of the Chinese Navy. During the Sharp Sword naval exercise, Taiwan's Ministry of National Defense reported 49 PLA aircraft, 19 PLAN vessels, and 7 Coast Guard ships around Taiwan on May 23rd, the first day of the joint exercises. 35 of the aircraft crossed the median line of the Taiwan Strait and entered the north, central, and southwest parts of Taiwan's air defense identification zone. The second day, on May 24th, Taiwan's Ministry of Defense reported 62 PLA aircraft and 27 PLAN vessels operating around Taiwan. This time, 47 of the aircraft crossed the median line of the Taiwan Strait, and entered Taiwan's southwest, southeast, and eastern air defense identification zone. Meanwhile, according to the propaganda footage released by China, we have images of 6 main platforms and weapon systems that the PLA deployed for this exercise. These platforms included the J-20 stealth fighter aircraft, the J-16 fighter, the Type 52D destroyer Kunming, the Type 71 amphibious transport dock, Dongfeng series ballistic missiles, and the PHL-16 multiple rocket launch system. Meanwhile, while the Chinese military featured all these platforms in their PR campaign, it does not appear that in reality the PLA conducted any live fire exercises. We can also briefly cover China's post-landing strategy. There are currently a total of about 400,000 police officers in the Xinjiang province, 200,000 of which is part of the People's Liberation Army, and the rest being mostly composed of the PAP, the People's Armed Police, or various regular police units, which are tasked with enforcing law and order. The People's Republic of China may employ a similar strategy in Taiwan, with the PLA spearheading the offensive while leaving calming operations to the PAP. In recent years, the People's Armed Police has been transformed into a force capable of supporting the PLA in rear support operations over the years. You see, the Chinese understood always protect the rear end areas. According to the International Institute for Strategic Studies, the PAP has gained responsibility for the Chinese Coast Guard and is now focused on 3 core missions: internal security, maritime security, and supporting the PLA in times of war. Like we said before, proper countermeasures and maneuvers in response to foreign military deployments must be considered. There are constant large-scale military exercises inside China that involve the entire Eastern Theater Command, and sometimes combined with the air and naval components of the Northern and Southern Theater Commands. The Eastern Theater Command has multiple group armies under its jurisdiction, namely the 71st, 72nd, and 73rd group armies that are facing Taiwan. The ground forces of a group army in the PLA typically consists of around 6 maneuver combined arms brigades. We will analyze their structure in a future video, but we can estimate a group army to total 30,000 to 50,000 military personnel, roughly the size of 1 to 2 NATO Army corps. This suggests a ground force manpower for the Eastern Theater Command of approximately 90,000 to 150,000 troops. This will probably be the spearhead of the invasion force for Taiwan. If we add naval, air, and support units, we can add another 120,000 to 150,000 personnel, for a total of 210,000 to 300,000 troops just for the Eastern Theater Command. This is massive. That's 50% more than the Russian invasion force of 2022. And all this not along a 2,000-kilometer front, but only around Taiwan. I can barely imagine the concentration of troops that we will witness. One important thing to notice is how PLA ground forces are constantly conducting military exercises in the background. One such example is that PLA units from other regions regularly visit Xinjiang to undergo training and exchange knowledge with local PLA units. Similarly, Eastern Theater Command units can train with the ones of the Southern Theater Command, which are stationed in mountainous regions similar to the ones we can find in Taiwan. So overall, there's this entire military expertise that is being shared among the ranks of the People's Liberation Army. Another example is the Shurihe training base in Inner Mongolia, the largest training base of the PLA and also all across Asia. It is most well known for hosting the 2017 PLA's 90th anniversary parade, with Xi Jinping's inspection. The training facilities can accommodate 5 divisions of the ground forces, and C4 ISR systems are installed all across the training base. Not only that, but in that same region, the Chinese army also built a life-size mock-up of certain parts of Taiwan's capital, Taipei. For example, a video released 10 years ago revealed Chinese troops practicing an all-out assault on the fake presidential palace, looking almost exactly the same as the one we can find in Taipei. Coincidence? Not sure. I mean, they also do train around a mock-up of the Eiffel Tower. In 2011, the PLA created its first OP4 unit, Opposition Force. Fun fact, in the Chinese military, the OP4 is represented with the color blue, because red is the color of the communists, and that's good. In the cross-strait live-fire exercises from 2014 to 2016, the Blue Army was led by Senior Colonel Man Guangxi. During this time, he fought 33 war games involving close to 30 divisions and brigades, and achieved a record of 32 wins and 1 loss. And because of that, Man Guangxi became some sort of meme icon in China. These war game victories clearly showed the capabilities of this OP4 general and how seriously China is preparing for the next war. However, his crushing victories as Team Blue also demonstrated the monumental task ahead of the PLA's invasion of Taiwan and exposed the lack of ability in countering Western tactics among regular units, as Team Blue basically operates under NATO doctrine. Contrary of Western expectations and experience from the buildup of Russian forces before the invasion of Ukraine, the PLA may actually not give any reaction time for the West to react to its military deployments. Essentially, they want to capture Taiwan so fast that it becomes like some sort of fait accompli. This is evident both from past deployments and the recent military exercises. Before Pelosi's visit to Taiwan in 2022, and while tensions with the US and Taiwan were high, the 71st Group Army from Hubei was given the order to transfer its entirety to Zhejiang province within 2 days, and this operation was a success. China deployed roughly 50,000 troops to embarkation areas within 48 hours. It's important to note that all major roads and highways in Zhejiang are of military grade, which are assumed to be capable of carrying tanks and have a certain degree of resistance against strikes. Another important aspect is the capabilities of the railway network. For example, in a joint military exercise with Mongolia, the Chinese military analyzed the transportation of 100 armored vehicles, equivalent to a PLA's medium combined arms battalion, and planned its redeployment in 3 echelons within 3 days. In other words, they're constantly trying to improve the way they can transfer a large amount of troops and the vehicles from one side of China to another. Fun fact, some people in Hubei province caught wind of this large-scale military exercise by the Eastern Theater Command, and the stress among the civilian population immediately spiked. They must have been like, GG well played, or going in.
Get up. Gear up. Fall in.
In the end, the 2022 exercise was announced on the 2nd of August, the same day as Pelosi's visit. Assuming that the transit order was given on the same day, it took only 3 days before the elements that were involved completed the maneuver. However, there's no available information regarding this incident on the internet. Unfortunately, I cannot further analyze this military exercise and all the deployments that occurred, because unofficial reporting of military movements of the PLA is strictly forbidden in China. That's all I have for you today. Let me know in the comments.
A race for speed.
The U.S. does not currently have the ability to even track this weapon, much less defeat it. It will give the Chinese the ability to conduct a nuclear strike anywhere in the world without warning.
The hypersonic sector has seen a meteoric rise in advancements in the recent few years, with majority of these coming from a single nation alone. This nation, being quiet, initially stunned the world when one of its hypersonic vehicles circled around the globe.
China has rapidly increased its missile arsenal. This is a menacing challenge to the United States.
Setting a bar so high, none others could touch it. The nation, without a doubt, is none other than China, who currently sits as the sole hypersonic superior in the whole wide world, and we still haven't seen its full potential yet. Today's episode will uncover how China is extremely advanced than the rivals, particularly the US, in hypersonic weapons supremacy.
Been very clear about our concerns over China's advancements in certain capabilities, a wide range of capabilities.
China's rapid advancements in hypersonic weapons are reshaping the power dynamics in the Indo-Pacific region. As the world watches, China is making strategic moves that has seen it outpacing the United States, a nation that has long been considered the leader in military technology. By investing heavily in cutting-edge technology like a new cooling system for hypersonic missiles and combining 6G communications with laser systems, China is enhancing its strategic capabilities in ways that were unimaginable just a few years ago. These developments aren't just about showing off new toys. They pose a real challenge to the US military's ability to maintain its influence in the region, especially if a conflict were to arise over Taiwan. The US has historically relied on superior technology and rigorous training to maintain its edge. But what happens when those advantages start to slip away? China's rapid advancements could and would undermine the US's ability to project power, making it increasingly difficult to counter Chinese ambitions in the Indo-Pacific. Could this shift in power be a sign of what's to come? China's recent progress in hypersonic weaponry is a clear threat to US dominance in the Indo-Pacific. China has carefully positioned itself to potentially outmaneuver the United States in any future conflict over control of this critical region. By establishing a formidable presence in the South China Sea, Taiwan Strait, and East China Sea, China has essentially created a fortified zone that would be incredibly costly for the US and its allies to penetrate. Breaking through this defense would come at a high price, both in terms of resources and human lives. Beijing's strategy is rooted in a concept known as active defense, which focuses on protecting China's immediate surroundings while building a network of allies based on shared strategic and economic interests, rather than ideological alignment. This different approach allows China to forge partnerships that enhance its global influence, even if these alliances are not based on common values. China's sheer population size also plays a significant role in this equation. With more people than the United States, China's military is naturally larger, a fact that cannot be ignored in any potential conflict. While the US and its allies have relied on superior technology, greater funding, and better trained forces to compensate for this numerical disadvantage, the proximity of any conflict to Chinese territory gives Beijing a significant edge. At the current pace, it seems increasingly likely that China could surpass the United States in military capability. China has consistently demonstrated that it can not only match, but most of the times even exceed the technological advantages that the US once took for granted. Also, China is now allocating more funds than ever to its military, ensuring that these investments align with a strategic vision aimed at achieving long-term dominance. In the realm of hypersonic weapons, China is flying circles around its American counterparts. According to a report from Interesting Engineering, scientists at China's National University of Defense Technology's College of Aerospace and Engineering have developed a new cooling device for hypersonic missiles. This innovation allows the missile to extend its flight time by nearly 2.5 hours, enabling it to reach speeds between Mach 7 and Mach 20, while executing complex maneuvers that would challenge most existing air defense systems. Check out one of our recent videos to explore this discovery in depth. Imagine waking up to the news of a devastating attack on key targets, carried out with such speed and precision that the US military's advantages are rendered obsolete. The implications of such an event are staggering and could fundamentally alter the balance of power in the region. Is the US prepared to counter such a threat, or is it already too late? China's advancements in hypersonic weapons don't stop there. A recent study suggests that, by employing a skip-gliding technique in the upper atmosphere, a Chinese hypersonic lead vehicle could extend its range beyond the Indo-Pacific, potentially even threatening the mainland United States. This capability would mark a significant escalation in China's ability to project power globally, raising concerns about the US's ability to defend its own territory. But China's ambitions don't end with hypersonic weapons. 2 years ago, Chinese scientists made a breakthrough by combining their emerging sixth-generation, 6G, internet technology with advanced laser systems to create a next-generation communications network. This system allows for greater control over hypersonic weapons by beaming a 6G internet laser through the plasma bubble that forms around a hypersonic glide vehicle as it re-enters the Earth's atmosphere at extreme speeds. This innovation ensures continuous control over the weapon from launch to target, a capability that could significantly hinder the US's ability to project power in the Indo-Pacific region. These technological advancements are not just theoretical, they have practical implications that could stunt whatever power projection capabilities the US currently possesses. The gap between the two superpowers is closing fast, and in some areas, China is already ahead. To understand the gravity of the situation, it's worth looking back at a time when the world was on the brink of conflict between China and Taiwan. In the end, the rise of China's military power is a story of ambition, innovation, and strategic foresight. China's ability to rapidly develop and deploy cutting-edge technologies is a clear sign to its determination to reshape the global order. As the US grapples with these changes, China keeps going significantly ahead in terms of military power, and pretty soon, the world will see another dominant superpower who, unlike US, actually condemns and works to stop a genocide. A much-needed change, to say the least. With much about how China is extremely advanced than the rivals, particularly the US, in hypersonic weapon supremacy covered, it is time to wrap this one up. If you have any topic
quite the crazy story here. Exclusive from CNN, the U.S. seizes Venezuela President Nicolas Maduro's airplane in the Dominican Republic. The United States has seized Venezuela President Nicolas Maduro's airplane after determining that its acquisition was in violation of U.S. sanctions, among other criminal issues. The U.S. flew the aircraft to Florida on Monday, according to 2 U.S. officials. It's the latest development in what has long been a frosty relationship between the U.S. and Venezuela, and its seizure in the Dominican Republic marks an escalation as the U.S. continues to investigate what it regards as corrupt practices by Venezuela's government. The plane has been described by officials as Venezuela's equivalent to Air Force One, and it has been pictured in previous state visits by Maduro around the world. This sends a message all the way up to the top, one of the U.S. officials told CNN. Seizing the foreign head of state's plane is unheard of for criminal matters. we're sending a clear message here that no one is above the law. No one is above the reach of U.S. sanctions. In a statement, Attorney General Merrick Garland said that the Justice Department seized an aircraft that we allege was illegally purchased for $13 million through a shell company and smuggled out of the United States for use by Nicolas Maduro and his cronies. The plane was purchased from a company in Florida, the Justice Department said, and was illegally exported in April 2023 from the United States to Venezuela through the Caribbean. That must have been some operation. I'd like to see a documentary as to how that happened. But CNN cut into their news coverage with an exclusive report on this. And you talk about, you know, a narrative being shaped unconsciously from within the walls of the empire. Look at the first 2.5. We're only going to watch 2.5 minutes of this. The whole segment's about 6 minutes. But look at this coverage. This is pretty amazing.
Welcome back to the breaking news. Some exclusive live pictures that we're showing you right now of the seized plane belonging to Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro. Maduro, we should note, is not on board, but the plane was seized by officials for violating U.S. sanctions. CNN's Kylie Atwood joins me now. Kylie, this is pretty extraordinary. This does not happen, obviously, every day where U.S. authorities go in and seize the plane of a head of state. But that is essentially what's happened this morning. Can you break this down for us?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the plane of Nicolas Maduro, the president of Venezuela, is now in the hands of the United States. As you can see there, those images demonstrate that it has just landed in Florida. It was seized by U.S. authorities in the Dominican Republic. That is according to multiple U.S. officials who spoke with our colleague Priscilla Alvarez about this. And how this all came to fruition, Jim, is that this plane was in the Dominican Republic in recent months. We don't know exactly why, but that presented the opportunity for U.S. authorities to work with authorities in the Dominican Republic to actually make up a plan and seize the plane. And just to give folks context, this plane is effectively the Air Force One of Venezuela. This is a plane that cost about $13 million, the U.S. estimates. It's been used by Maduro to travel around the world, to make visits, to see other world leaders and the like. It's now in the hands of the U.S. government. It's an extraordinary move. The U.S. has for years been trying to disrupt the flow of goods and...
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's like the Elvis plane at Graceland. You go into Elvis's plane at Graceland?
Of course I did.
Yeah. So here she goes. She starts talking about...
the thing I found most fascinating was the wood 8-track player.
Yeah, yeah.
The U.S. government. It's an extraordinary move. The U.S. has for years been trying to disrupt the flow of goods and finances, money going into Venezuela. For example, they have disrupted luxury cars going into the country.
Why?
But we should note that this is just such a bold move because according to one of those U.S. officials who spoke with our colleague, this is unheard of and sends a signal that no one is out of the reach of U.S. sanctions. So they clearly had their eye on this plane for a while that was being used by the president of Venezuela, and now it is in U.S. custody. Now, the process here is that now that it is in the United States, Venezuela can petition for the plane. So we'll watch and see what happens there.
Oh, they
but
can ask
also,
for it
the
back.
United States can collect evidence from the plane. We just saw some folks heading into the plane, U.S. authorities heading in there with what appeared to be a recording device. They'll be able to collect evidence in terms of what the president of Venezuela was doing potentially on that plane. We'll watch and see how this all unfolds.
Well, watch and see. So what's astounding about that is that it just assumes that we have the rights to do this. And it says, as a matter of fact, we've been trying to disrupt the flow of goods and revenue into Venezuela for years. And this just shows no one is beyond the reach of U.S. sanctions. This just proves that if you have oil under your ground, we will fuck with you until you give it to us. We will roust you until you give it to us. Of what business is it of ours to snuff around their Air Force One for evidence of what? What is our jurisdiction
what
here?
Did Venezuela do to us?
What did they do to? Why is this our problem? Why are they within our jurisdiction? Why do we get to investigate a foreign leader for corruption? What does this have to do with us at all, except for the fact that they have resources that we want cheap? And when a leader south of the border doesn't give us their resources cheap and turn their country into a plantation for the United States, we fuck with them
in this way. And even by those standards, this, as CNN says, is unprecedented. This is a radical step, even by American standards. Now, they're saying the very purchase of this plane was in violation of U.S. sanctions. Well, that's like saying,
why do we
look,
have sanctions?
Right. That's like saying, right, like why were they not allowed to buy this plane in the first place? Why? Because we don't like the way they run their government. Saudi Arabia is our ally. Israel, recent examples been in the news lately, is our ally. You think we care about that? Or you think we care about the oil? They don't make mention of this. This just assumes that we are going to investigate what's on this plane, and they're going to have to ask nicely to get the plane back. It just assumes that we have the right to just treat another foreign leader as if they're a store owner in like Little Italy 1922, where the mafia comes up and says, hey, what's yours is ours, or else we're going to have a problem. That's the subtext of this. It's no different whatsoever.
Well, if you are drinking the corporate media Kool-Aid, and you get into how they understand foreign policy, we are the good guys. Ultimately, we're trying to do right. And sometimes, because it's a complicated world, we accidentally do the wrong thing, but we don't mean to. And then there are countries like Venezuela that are, just wrong, and they're bad, and they're run by bad people. And gosh darn it, we have to do something about it. You know what it is? And it's very funny because the people who absorb these narratives also tend to be very woke. It's the white man's burden vision of the world, really. It's our responsibility. And we don't want this burden of civilizing other people and trying to protect their people from their corrupt governments. Gosh darn it, we're the world's only remaining superpower. And if we don't, who will? And as you point out, Saudi Arabia is our ally. If you want to even accept the premise that with Israel you have the fig leaf of the claim of it being a democratic country, even if you want to accept that, okay, so take Israel off the table. All right, so what about Saudi Arabia? What about the UAE? We have many allies that are deeply corrupt, that have no tradition of human rights. We arm these countries. We sell them weapons. Under Hillary's State Department, weapons sales to these countries went up because they had a whole backdoor bribery system through the Clinton Foundation. They would funnel money into the Clinton Foundation, and our State Department, lo and behold, would approve these arms sales, including to Saudi Arabia. So clearly that's not what it's about. So what is it about? Well, you got a country. If they had no oil, we wouldn't give a shit what goes on in Venezuela. They have oil. What is it? The world's largest proven reserves, right? Even more than Saudi Arabia in Venezuela. That's what this is all about. But you look at the average brainwashed American, and they actually think that this is about government corruption, which, hey, just if you stop for 1 second to think about it, let's say Venezuela is the most corrupt country in the history of governmental corruption. How is that our business?
Right. Of course.
Why are we involved? Why are we seizing presidential planes? What does that have to do with us?
Yeah. Now, look, before we wrap this segment, we do have to give Joe Biden some credit because he did this, that he made this very bold move, knowing full well that his vice president and candidate for the presidency this November is an avowed communist. Don't forget, Donald Trump says Kamala Harris is a communist, and what he says goes. So it is an especially bold move when your VP is a communist who is sympathetic to communism and sympathetic to Nicolas Maduro. So he really went out on a limb there and took that action.
Please clap.
A U.S. Navy sailor is being detained in Venezuela. Authorities are saying the sailor was traveling there unauthorized on personal business when he was taken into custody. News Nation's Xavier Walton has the story. Xavier, what are government officials saying about the timing of all of this?
Hey, Marky, good morning. This comes at a time when the United States and Venezuela are really, when it comes to their relationship, it's pretty tense. Officials still don't know why this U.S. Navy sailor was actually detained. And that's why some people, they're saying that the timing of all of this is a little bit suspicious. Let's get to what the Pentagon is saying, which, to be completely honest, is not much. But here's the statement that they have released saying the U.S. Navy is looking into this and working closely with the State Department. Officials at this point have not named this sailor. However, they have said that he was not approved leave by the U.S. military or on official travel to Venezuela when this happened. Pentagon officials saying the sailor was taken into Venezuelan custody around August 30th, so less than a week ago. Now, the reason some believe the timing of all this is a little bit suspicious because earlier this week, the U.S. seized Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro's plane over alleged sanction violations. That plane, it's like the equivalent to Air Force One, okay? So there's that, plus President Biden and his administration have questioned this summer's re-election results that kept President Maduro in power. Here's White House National Secretary, Communications Advisor John Kirby talking to Elizabeth Vargas.
We are in touch, as you might expect we would be, with Venezuelan authorities to try to learn more. The State Department is working on this very, very hard, as of course is the Department of the Navy and the Department of Defense. But we don't have a clear sense of exactly why he was detained.
So you have the detainment, you have the plane, and then also the re-election. You can understand why a lot of people are saying, hey, this is no coincidence that this U.S. Navy sailor is now in Venezuelan custody.
Yeah, timing is suspicious for sure. Okay, Xavier Walton, go get dry. It's raining hard.
Well, you think you can seize people playing and then your spies can be roaming around there and say they got lost? Man, say he got lost, man. Say he meant to take a left. He accidentally took a right. Well, your ass is in the military detention right now. You see, just like the United States being backstabbers that they are, they denounced the man. Oh, we don't know him. We never sent him there. We don't know how he got there. Oh, damn, man. That's how y'all do an American citizen, man. Kamala Harris, man, over there on official government business, and y'all denounced the man 3 times like Peter did Jesus, man. This is ridiculous.
Jump right into it. And one of the major issues, I guess I keep, maybe I was foreshadowing this here in my introduction, Rania, is the ongoing saga, I guess you could call it, as it concerns the outcome of the elections in Venezuela. There have been a number of important happenings that have taken place over the past several weeks, and we want to get into all of that, what it means, and perhaps some of what we can look for in the future. And as always, we are very, very honored to be joined by Zoe Alexandra, who is a journalist and editor of People's Dispatch, who also was there on the ground during the Venezuelan elections, several weeks ago. Zoe, as always, thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks so much for having me.
Well, it's great to have you, as always. A lot of things are happening around the elections, and I guess we'll sort of get into it all. But I think the most important factor that I was hoping you could talk about is the Venezuelan Supreme Court, which was asked by President Nicolas Maduro and various other opposition figures to adjudicate the dispute over the outcome, has rendered their ruling about what took place. What have they said, Zoe, and what can you tell us about it?
Yeah, well, this was a much expected ruling from the Venezuelan Supreme Court. As we know, in the days and week following this democratic process, as the opposition began to kind of ramp up their campaign in saying that fraud had taken place and all of the other things that we've covered here at People's Dispatch, and I know you've covered also on Breakthrough News, Nicolas Maduro came out and said, okay, if you're alleging there's fraud, why don't we bring this to the competent institutions? It's not, the competent institution is not international corporate media who can say, okay, if the opposition says there's fraud, and that's how the decision gets made. Actually, he said, in order for this to have a peaceful and democratic resolution, we must turn to the institutions in our country to resolve this matter. And so he said that his party, PSUV, was going to bring all of their electoral tallies that they collected on the day of the elections, and called on all the other parties to do the same. And so the Supreme Court kind of accepted this petition from Maduro, and had called on all the parties' representatives and the candidates to appear before the Supreme Court to present the famous tallies, which essentially every single party would collect on election day, in addition to the National Electoral Council. And so that happened again in the beginning of August. And they rendered their ruling last week to say that after reviewing all of the tallies of the different parties, that it confirms the results that were released by the CNE, which said that Maduro had won with 51% of the votes. And this is, really important because, again, if the opposition is alleging that with their tallies that fraud was committed and that Edmundo Gonzalez won with 70% of the vote, the Supreme Court basically just said, we actually reviewed the tallies of 8 parties and electoral alliances, and they say the exact same thing as the Electoral Council said, and that is that Maduro won the vote with 51%. So, it should be a case closed kind of situation. Different concerns were raised. The competent bodies did the checks that they needed to do. And there is sort of this resolution, which, most sectors of society said, okay, yeah, that sounds about right. On to the next thing, on to actually continuing to build the country and continuing with rebuilding the economy. But of course, we know that the U.S. has not really recognized this, and neither has the opposition.
Zoe, can you speak a bit about the neighboring countries? Because a lot has taken place, and some surprises, especially given the way that Brazil's leader and Colombia's leader have behaved in response to the U.S. alleging this election fraud and recognizing this opposition leader that did not win. Mexico's also taken a certain stance. Can you talk a bit about how things have played out regionally with these particular countries, as well as what's happened throughout through the OAS?
Definitely. So I just wanted to start by saying that Laura Richardson, the general of the U.S. Southern Command, which is the Southern Command of the U.S. Army, one of the many different kind of sections that it has, is currently in Chile for this huge kind of like army conference with generals from the region. And she said yesterday, while in Chile, that Venezuela's election was a clear example of how democracy is being undermined across the world. And it's funny because obviously
and this is a reason we're having the Venezuelan migrant crisis, because the U.S. is interfering in Venezuelans' elections, interfering in the way they run their country, trying to keep their system broken, trying to keep them impoverished. People are fleeing the country, and Maduro is pushing a lot of criminals out the country. This is ridiculous. And they just seized this man plane yesterday. He might send 300,000 more migrants with about 70,000 criminals in there with him. That's crazy.
She's saying this from Chile, a U.S. Army official. The irony is kind of overflowing in that sense, but it's important to point out, to start here, because we've seen Gabriel Boric really, really come down hard. And this isn't that much of a surprise in a sense. He was considered to be a sort of progressive leader. He comes out of the student movement. But, in terms of geopolitics, we've seen him have really strong alignment with Ukraine, for example. He's been kind of like the one Latin American leader who's really rallied behind U.S. and NATO war efforts, having a lot of meetings with Vladimir Zelensky, and constantly reiterating Ukraine's right to self-defense. And unsurprisingly, he has been sort of the fresh new face on the front line of attack against Venezuela. Even there was a leaked conversation that came out that even before the elections took place, that there was sort of direction and orientation for people to ask about these electoral tallies, indicating that this was going to be the path that they would take in mainstream media to talk about the illegitimacy of the electoral process. So Chile has been one of the countries that's really turned its back on Venezuela and has been kind of rallying other countries to do the same. Argentina, again, we've talked about Milei a lot of times. There's really no surprise there. His whole libertarianism, fight against communism, fight against leftism, really part and parcel of his whole charade. But it's interesting because at the same time that Milei is rallying against Venezuela, his country has 75% rate of poverty, 65% of children in poverty in his country. So perhaps he should be more concerned with his own country than what's happening in Venezuela. And what you mentioned, Rania, there is, you know, there was this sort of centrist bloc in a sense that was trying to say, okay, let's wait to see what the competent Venezuelan institutions say. We're not going to recognize neither the victory of Edmundo Gonzalez nor the victory of Maduro. We're going to wait and see. This sort of bloc was led by Mexico, Brazil, and Colombia. Lula, Petro, AMLO. And we did see a sort of kind of deviation or perhaps a new path charted by Petro and Lula, who were saying that, well, you know, it seems a little difficult. It seems like maybe there's no possibility for Venezuelans to actually resolve Venezuelans' problems and that there should be new elections. Maybe there should be a government of cohabitation, which would essentially mean PSUV ruling with the far-right opposition, which is completely unheard of. These positions were presented in sort of informal settings, in radio interviews, on social media. Many people shocked by this, but again, it's sort of their attempt to mediate and come on the world stage as the people who are like solving problems. But again, you know, completely undermining Venezuela's institutions. But in that vein, Mexico has actually maintained its position. And I think that with the Supreme Court ruling, notably, there's been a little bit less in the news of these leaders trying to kind of instigate. And I think we're going to see in the coming weeks that as things have already calmed down in Venezuela, as we're not seeing any sort of attempts to sort of create violent protests, all of that has really died down. The opposition, in a sense, has really been defeated on the streets. I think we're also going to see, hopefully, an international kind of corporate media that they also realize that this is a lost cause and that, you know, at the end of the day, the Venezuelan people spoke and they voted for Maduro. It was a, very close election. 51% is not a landslide, but it is a victory. And so we'll see where that goes in the coming days.
Into here and a lot to be said, and not to leave it unsaid that Gabriel Boric had no problem recognizing the coup government in Peru right away. But that's, I guess, a whole other question. But I do want to ask you, Zoe, because one of the issues that I think has become most discussed here is around maybe the essence of what democracy really means. And we recently saw this in the past several days, the National Popular Consultation, another form of electoral process there rooted in the commune movement of Venezuela. And I think this is, its own part of the discourse as it concerns what democracy really means and how it's being framed vis-a-vis the elections.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, since the Bolivarian Revolution began with Chavez winning the presidential elections in 1998, I think there's been over 30 electoral processes, and this includes referendums, popular consultations, presidential elections, legislative elections, all sorts of things. So, on one hand, when we're thinking about democracy and what is going to the polls, the Venezuelan people have been actively going to the polls, participating in this one form of democracy, which is, casting your vote. And so, Venezuela really excels at actually putting in the resources to have this form of directly hearing people's opinions, people's desires on how the country should move forward. But Venezuelan and Bolivarian democracy is far from limited to electoral processes. And so what you were referencing there, Eugene, of the National Popular Consultation, is a process that began. The first one took place in April of this year, and it's people, it's working class people who are organized in different communal circuits and different communal councils, going, carrying out a very lengthy process before heading to the polls, which involves consulting in the community, having different series of meetings and assemblies, and identifying what are the key needs, material needs of the community, where would they like government resources to go. So if you're from most countries in the world, you know that, for example, you might have potholes in your neighborhood, you might have problems with sewers, many different infrastructural problems, and oftentimes there's really no avenue for you to actually demand that the government deal with those, invest resources into bettering them. Maybe it's a common belief amongst the community that there's a real need for, a children's after school center or different sorts of things that would benefit the community. And what this popular communal consultation is actually giving people the ability to not only come up with those proposals amongst their community, but then actually to vote on which project do they want to be funded by the state, and actually getting that funding and taking that forward. So, I think the Bolivarian project and the Bolivarian democracy really expands and redefines what democracy means in the 21st century. I think in most countries in the world, we're seeing the erosion of democracy. We're seeing the erosion of this grand idea of liberal bourgeois democracy. In the US, third-party candidates aren't even able to get on the ballot without a huge legal fight. Whereas in Venezuela, there's dozens of parties and people are participating in creating a new form of democracy, but also really bringing their voice and their concerns to people in power, and actually being able to kind of distribute not only resources, but power back into communities.
Mm-hmm. No, well, extremely interesting process. And thankfully, we have outlets like People's Dispatch who have been covering all of the details of everything happening with the presidential election and national popular consultation, and just about
Is it possible that Turkey, a key NATO member, is breaking away from traditional Western alliances to make a daring move toward joining BRICS? BRICS, a group of emerging economies, has long stood as a counterweight to Western dominance. Turkey's recent request to join BRICS signals a possible shift in global alliances and has certainly caught the attention of both Washington and Brussels. According to Ömer Çelik, the spokesperson for President Recep Tayyip Erdogan's ruling party, the process is underway, suggesting Turkey is making moves that could redefine its position on the world stage. But is Turkey merely hedging its bets, or is this a calculated action in a broader geopolitical strategy? Let's find out. Ömer Çelik recently said that the Turkish president has already expressed various times about their willingness to join BRICS. Later, when Russian presidential spokesperson Dmitry Peskov was asked, he also confirmed that indeed Turkey is showing interest in joining BRICS. So starting with, why would a NATO member like Turkey, historically aligned with the West, seek membership in BRICS? Turkey's interest in BRICS is more than just a strategic pivot. It's a declaration of independence from a Western alliance that has increasingly shown its limitations. For decades, Turkey has played the part of a loyal NATO ally, standing shoulder to shoulder with the West against various global threats. Yet, despite this unwavering support, Turkey has often found itself sidelined and treated as a junior partner rather than an equal player. Ankara's flirtation with BRICS is not a sudden infatuation, but a calculated move stemming from years of frustration. The European Union, for instance, has kept Turkey waiting in the lobby for membership since 2005, dangling the carrot of inclusion while continually moving the goalposts. And let's not forget the West's tepid response to the failed coup attempt in 2016, which Ankara perceived as a lack of genuine support from its so-called allies. BRICS, on the other hand, represents a group of nations that are challenging the status quo, countries that are not content with the world being dictated by a few Western powers. Joining BRICS allows Turkey to align itself with nations that are actively redefining global governance. Turkey's engagement with BRICS is about finding new friends who respect its ambitions and offer an alternative to the Western-centric worldview that has dominated for so long. As Turkey positions itself at the crossroads of East and West, another question emerges. What does this mean for NATO and its future dynamics? Here's a reminder to please like and share the video, and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Africa's geopolitics, economy, and changing landscape. Let's continue now. Turkey's move towards BRICS is not just a statement of independence, it's a seismic wake-up call for NATO, a military alliance that has long been predicated on unity against common threats. By exploring membership in BRICS, Turkey sends a powerful signal that all is not well within NATO's ranks. For decades, NATO has relied on Turkey's strategic position at the crossroads of Europe and Asia, leveraging its geographic significance and formidable military capabilities to project power and maintain a foothold in a volatile region. But Ankara's willingness to forge alliances outside of NATO's framework challenges the very foundation of NATO's unity and could set a precedent for other member states feeling marginalized or disillusioned by the alliance's often inconsistent policies. Turkey's interest in BRICS reveals a growing discontent with NATO's approach and strategic coherence. NATO has always portrayed itself as a unified bloc ready to confront shared challenges, whether they be military threats or political crises. However, Turkey's engagement with BRICS, a group often perceived as a counterweight to Western influence, exposes a critical vulnerability within NATO: the lack of a cohesive strategy that reflects the diverse interests of its member states. Turkey's potential membership in BRICS raises uncomfortable questions about NATO's ability to maintain internal cohesion in the face of shifting global dynamics. This move by Turkey also highlights a broader issue within NATO: its struggle to adapt to a multipolar world, where alliances are fluid and old certainties are being constantly challenged. NATO's strategic coherence is already under strain from a variety of internal disagreements. Defense spending has been a perennial point of contention, with the United States often criticizing European allies for not pulling their weight. Divergent views on how to engage with Russia further exacerbate these tensions. While some NATO members, particularly those in Eastern Europe, view Russia as an existential threat, others, including Turkey, have maintained more pragmatic relations with Moscow. Turkey's potential alignment with BRICS could amplify these fissures, pushing NATO to the brink of a strategic identity crisis. Ankara's interests in BRICS could set a precedent that might encourage other NATO members to explore alternative alliances, especially those feeling sidelined or whose interests are not fully represented within the current NATO framework. Countries like Hungary and Italy, which have shown a willingness to pursue independent foreign policies that sometimes diverge from NATO's consensus, might be emboldened by Turkey's actions. If Turkey, a key NATO member with one of the largest militaries in the alliance, can consider joining a bloc perceived as antagonistic to NATO's interests, what is stopping other countries from exploring similar paths? Turkey's move is also a stark reminder that NATO's Cold War-era mindset may no longer be adequate in a multipolar world. The alliance was built on the premise of containing the Soviet Union and defending Western Europe from communist expansion. However, in a world where power is no longer concentrated in a few hands, and where regional powers like China, Russia, and India play increasingly prominent roles, NATO's traditional strategies and doctrines appear outdated. Turkey's engagement with BRICS reflects this new reality. It signals that countries are no longer content to be passive participants in a US-led world order. They want to assert their agency and pursue their interests, even if it means stepping outside traditional alliances. In this new era, where old alliances are being questioned and new ones are forming, NATO must decide whether it can adapt to these changing dynamics or risk becoming irrelevant. Turkey's move towards BRICS is not just about Ankara seeking new friends. It is about challenging a world order that has long been dominated by a few Western powers. NATO's response, or lack thereof, will determine whether it remains a relevant force in global politics or becomes a relic of a bygone era. Now we must also ask, how does this shift affect Turkey's relations with other global powers, particularly the United States? The United States, Turkey's longtime ally, is unlikely to view Ankara's BRICS overtures with a warm smile. For Washington, Turkey's move represents a direct challenge to U.S. efforts to maintain a unified front against China and Russia, the leading powers within BRICS. The U.S. has already had its share of grievances with Turkey, from Ankara's purchase of Russian S-400 missiles to its independent stance on Syria. Should Turkey proceed with BRICS membership, it could exacerbate existing tensions and lead to a recalibration of U.S. foreign policy towards Turkey. Washington may be forced to reconsider its military and economic ties with Ankara, potentially imposing sanctions or reducing support. However, such punitive measures could backfire, pushing Turkey further into the arms of BRICS and solidifying a new anti-Western alliance. Yet Turkey's action might also serve as a strategic gambit to extract concessions from the West. By showing that it has alternatives, Ankara could leverage its BRICS bid to gain more favorable terms from the US and Europe. This is a delicate balance of diplomacy, where the stakes are high and the moves are complex. With the US and NATO potentially on edge, another critical question arises. What impact will Turkey's BRICS ambitions have on its economic and political future? For Turkey, joining BRICS offers not just geopolitical leverage, but also significant economic opportunities. As part of BRICS, Turkey could gain access to new markets and investment opportunities, diversify its economic partners, and reduce its reliance on Western markets and financial institutions. Given the economic challenges Turkey has faced in recent years, from currency devaluation to inflation, aligning with BRICS could provide a much-needed economic lifeline. BRICS countries, particularly China and Russia, have demonstrated a willingness to invest heavily in their allies, often with fewer strings attached than Western institutions. Moreover, BRICS membership could enhance Turkey's bargaining power in international trade negotiations, allowing it to navigate global economic currents more effectively. Politically, joining BRICS could bolster Erdogan's standing domestically by showcasing Turkey as a key player on the global stage. It reinforces a narrative of a strong, independent Turkey that is not beholden to any one power bloc. This move could resonate with Erdogan's base, which often views Western institutions with skepticism. As Turkey contemplates its future within BRICS, the global order itself is under scrutiny. This brings us to the final question. Is Turkey's move a sign of a larger shift in global power dynamics? Turkey's bid to join BRICS is more than just a strategic decision. It's a reflection of a world in transition. The post-Cold War era of US-led unipolarity is giving way to a more complex, multipolar reality where emerging economies are asserting their influence. BRICS, with its recent expansion, is at the forefront of this shift, challenging the traditional Western-dominated frameworks of global governance. Turkey's move is emblematic of a growing trend among nations seeking to diversify their alliances and hedge against the uncertainties of a changing global landscape. Countries are no longer content to align solely with the West. They are exploring new partnerships that better reflect their interests and aspirations in a world where power is increasingly diffuse. In joining BRICS, Turkey is betting on a future where influence is not determined by geography or historical alliances, but by a nation's ability to adapt and align with diverse global currents. It's a bold vision, one that could reshape not only Turkey's destiny, but also the contours of global power. Do you think Turkey's move to join BRICS will push the West to get with the program and accept the new reality of a multipolar world? Let us know in the comments section. Will more nations follow Turkey's lead? Do you want to watch more videos
Countries in the BRICS alliance and other global South nations have increasingly expressed discontent with the United Nations, citing several prominent issues. At the forefront is the disproportionate sway that Western powers hold over key international organizations and decision-making forums. These nations argue that the current UN framework fails to properly represent their interests and perspectives, leading to demands for a more equitable and democratic global structure. At a recent BRICS summit, member nations called for extensive reforms within the UN, with a particular focus on enhancing the role of emerging economies. One of their primary concerns is the composition of the Security Council, alongside the need to revisit the veto power held by its permanent members. This growing dissatisfaction has fueled calls for comprehensive reform or even a total restructuring of the UN, aiming to create a more balanced and representative system of international governance. In this analysis, we will delve into the key reforms being proposed and the motivations driving these changes. Western bias and double standards. The BRICS countries often perceive a marked bias in the United Nations and other global bodies, particularly in favor of Western countries. This perceived imbalance is especially noticeable on human rights matters, where BRICS members, such as China and Russia, frequently face criticism, while similar issues in Western nations receive less scrutiny. For instance, Russia is regularly condemned for its human rights record, including its treatment of the LGBTI community, while China faces criticism for its policies in Tibet. However, comparable issues in Western nations often avoid the same level of international censure. A clear example of a double standard in the treatment of refugees is evident in Europe's contrasting responses to Ukrainian refugees versus those from countries like Syria, Afghanistan, and Somalia. The European Union has swiftly mobilized extensive resources for Ukrainians fleeing the Russian invasion. Under the EU's Temporary Protection Directive, Ukrainian refugees receive broad rights, including access to work, healthcare, and education, with some countries such as Poland hosting millions. This welcoming approach has been hailed as unprecedented in scale and speed, especially given the demographic challenges Europe faces. In contrast, refugees from Syria, Afghanistan, and Somalia have historically faced far harsher treatment. During the 2015 Syrian refugee crisis, many EU nations erected barriers and restricted asylum processes, citing security concerns. Today, many of these refugees live in overcrowded camps or face difficult conditions in host countries such as Turkey and Lebanon, where support has waned over time. Critics argue that identity plays a significant role in these disparities. Ukrainian refugees, largely white and Christian, may be perceived as more culturally aligned with Europe, while refugees from predominantly Muslim countries in the Middle East and Africa have faced discrimination and limited access to asylum. For instance, while Ukrainians can enter the EU visa-free, asylum seekers from countries like Afghanistan must navigate far stricter protocols. This stark contrast highlights an underlying racial and cultural bias, reinforcing the perception that Europe is more willing to help refugees who appear European. In the Israel-Palestine conflict, international reactions also reflect imbalances. While there was widespread condemnation of Hamas's attacks on Israeli civilians, the response to Israel's retaliatory actions in Gaza, including the use of white phosphorus and cutting off essential supplies, has been notably subdued. These actions, resulting in civilian casualties and considered war crimes by human rights organizations, illustrate the inconsistencies in humanitarian responses, as highlighted by groups like Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International. Let's take a quick pause. Could you do us a favor? If you enjoy our content, please hit the like button. To help even more, leave your thoughts and feedback in the comments. Your engagement helps us grow. Thank you. Representation and influence. BRICS countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, have long argued that global governance institutions such as the United Nations, World Bank, and International Monetary Fund are disproportionately controlled by Western nations. They contend that these institutions, established in the aftermath of World War II, no longer represent the shifting balance of global power, as emerging economies now play a much more significant role in the world economy. A key concern for BRICS nations is the leadership structure of institutions like the IMF and World Bank, where Western dominance is institutionalized. For instance, by tradition, the head of the IMF is always a European, while the World Bank is led by an American. This arrangement reflects the post-World War II world order but no longer corresponds to the contemporary economic landscape, where countries like China and India are major global players. Moreover, BRICS countries emphasize that their growing geopolitical and economic influence is not matched by a corresponding voice in global decision-making. While BRICS nations now account for about 40% of the global population and over 25% of global GDP, their voting power within the IMF and World Bank remains limited compared to Western countries. Attempts at reform, such as increasing quotas and voting shares, have made little progress, further fueling frustration among these emerging economies. This power imbalance has led to calls from BRICS for reforms to create a more equitable global governance system that better reflects current economic realities. They have also sought alternatives, such as developing parallel financial institutions like the New Development Bank, designed to challenge the hegemony of Western-led institutions. Economic and developmental concerns. Many Global South nations, including those within BRICS, criticize Western-controlled institutions for imposing strict financial conditions that hinder their economic growth and sovereignty. They argue that these requirements, such as austerity measures and debt repayment prioritization, primarily serve Western interests at the expense of their developmental needs. This approach, they claim, stifles investment in critical sectors like healthcare and education, hampering long-term development. Geopolitical tensions, particularly those involving Russia and China, have amplified dissatisfaction with the current international order. Western sanctions and political pressure are often viewed as attempts to limit BRICS' influence, deepening frustrations with institutions like the UN. China, in particular, faces significant challenges from Western nations over issues in Xinjiang, Hong Kong, and the South China Sea. Sanctions and punitive measures from the US and EU are seen as efforts to constrain China's rising power, contributing to a growing sense of alienation within the global system. Furthermore, alliances like the Quad, US, India, Japan, and Australia, and AUKUS, Australia, the UK, and the US, are seen by BRICS members as moves to counterbalance China's rise and Russia's assertiveness. These alliances further reinforce the perception that BRICS countries are being marginalized within the existing international framework. A particularly contentious issue lies in the IMF's allocation of voting power, which remains heavily skewed toward Western countries. BRICS members argue that their increasing economic influence, such as China's $14 trillion GDP in 2020, is not adequately represented in the current system. BRICS nations contend that global climate policies, largely shaped by Western countries, often impose unrealistic burdens on developing economies. While Western nations call for ambitious emissions cuts, BRICS countries emphasize the need for financial and technological assistance to transition to greener economies without stalling their development. The COVID-19 pandemic further highlighted inequities in global governance, with BRICS nations criticizing the World Health Organization and other international bodies for what they see as a response that favored wealthy nations. Vaccine hoarding and the delayed distribution of vaccines to poorer nations underscored the need for fairer global health policies. Moreover, BRICS members believe that current global trade policies, such as agricultural subsidies in Europe and the US, disadvantage farmers in developing nations, further distorting global markets. Established in 1945 after World War II, the UN's primary aims were to maintain global peace, promote human rights, and foster economic development. However, its current structure, particularly the Security Council, reflects the power dynamics of the post-war era, which many argue are now outdated. Post-war formation and Cold War challenges. The United Nations was founded on October 24, 1945, by 51 nations, with its charter laying the foundation for the organization. Over time, as African and Asian nations gained independence, the UN expanded, playing a vital role in decolonization and peacekeeping. During the Cold War, ideological tensions between the United States and the Soviet Union often spilled over into the UN, but the organization still managed to mediate key international conflicts and promote decolonization. Post-Cold War period and the 21st century. The end of the Cold War allowed the UN to engage more actively in peacekeeping and humanitarian efforts, although failures like the Rwandan genocide prompted internal reforms. More recently, the UN has focused on sustainable development, launching the Millennium Development Goals in 2000 and later the Sustainable Development Goals in 2015. Potential alternatives to the UN. Several alternatives to the current UN structure have been proposed. Some suggest creating a new organization that better reflects the geopolitical realities of today, including expanding the Security Council to include nations like India, Brazil, and South Africa. Others advocate for strengthening regional bodies like the African Union and ASEAN, allowing them to take on a more active role in addressing regional issues. Proposals for Democratic Nations, DN. One prominent reform proposal is the creation of the Democratic Nations, DN, a bicameral system designed to represent countries more fairly based on population and influence. A key component of this proposal is the establishment of a World Parliamentary Assembly, which would initially serve in an advisory capacity but could evolve into a legislative body, giving global citizens more direct representation in international decision-making. Challenges and opportunities. While these reforms face significant challenges, particularly from nations with veto power in the UN, the incremental approach of establishing a World Parliamentary Assembly could help build momentum for broader global governance reform. Broad public support for more democratic international structures, as shown by recent surveys, may also aid in overcoming these challenges. That's all for this video. Thank you for watching this video. We sincerely appreciate you joining.
If Steve Harvey can fix his mouth to say, "Yeah, I don't get out of bed for $10,000," Black America should not get out to the polls for Joe Biden or for Kamala Harris, in this case, Kamala Harris, for 10%. In this video, I'm going to expose the shocking truth about the Democratic Party that no one's talking about. I'm going to use the NBA to prove my point. See, you got to understand. The Democrats, they're very slick. They know how to throw numbers at you and get you kind of confused. Mislead you. See, because what they like to do is they like to say, hey, we did all these great things. We got all this stuff done. We did the infrastructure bill, the student loan forgiveness, the canceling. We did the chips. We even cut on some broadband connections for people to live out in the sticks. We did all these great things. What are you talking about? We're amazing. We cut insulin. And the problem is a lot of people fall for this type of talk, right? They fall for the unemployment numbers or the employment numbers. They fall for the student loan stuff. They fall for the talk about the chips, even though they don't know anybody that got a chip job. They fall for the broadband stuff, although they already had 5G where they at. And they forget it don't matter unless it impacts your life. It's like somebody else lost 50 pounds and you gained 20 pounds. And you jumping up and down about them losing weight. Now, I know we should be supportive of our other brothers and sisters or whoever it is that's winning it all, okay? I understand that. But there comes a time where you have to be selfish. Black people are not in a position that we can just jump up and down for migrants coming over to the country. That's what people don't get. We're not in a position. There are people that think that we are doing well when we are not doing well and have not ever been doing well in this country. There's nothing great to go back to. And this is where my NBA analogy comes in. What if I told you last year there was a team that got 3,244 field goals or baskets? You know, of those baskets, 2,310 of them were two-point shots, 1,623 of them were free throws, 916 offensive rebounds, 2,564 defensive rebounds, throwing them elbows. They had 1,884 assists. There were 934 three-point shots. It's almost 1,000 three-point shots. That's a lot of shots to score. Not by yourself practicing in a game. 308 blocks, 574 steals for a total of 9,045 total points in one season. You go, damn, that sounds great, man. That's an amazing score. Crushed it. They killed it. Sounds impressive, don't it? Now, what if I told you that was the worst team in the NBA? Yeah, that was the worst team. That was the Detroit Pistons. It sounds good because I'm just giving you the numbers without any context. which is sort of like the whole game plan for the Joe Biden, the Biden-Harris campaign. And now the Kamala campaign that really don't even want to run on the Biden numbers, running on no numbers, running on nothing. Yeah, the Pistons season was the worst season in the league. They only won 17 games. They lost 65 games, 17 wins to 65 losses. But it sounded good. They scored 9,045 points. They came in dead last. What I'm trying to get you to understand is this is the game that's played with you. You don't know the context. The team that won the championship was the Denver Nuggets. And the Denver Nuggets, their numbers was crazy. They won 53 games, and they only lost 29. And the last game was the most important because that's how they got that jewelry called the winning the national championship. That's what they got. But see how the game it's got trickery in it. You'll mess around, you listen to these people rattle off numbers, rattle off stats, rattle off all this stuff, and you think, that's something. Nah, it's nothing unless you won the game. Unless you got the trophy. And if you didn't get the trophy, what place did we come in? And what I'm trying to tell you, black people are doing so bad in this country, we can't just sit back and root for the other team to win. You can't be the Pistons going, yay, go Denver. Nah, you can't be Detroit. You can't be the Pistons rooting for the Nuggets because you last. That means you die first. That means your kids have less of a bright future. That means you have less to pass down to them. You understand what I'm saying? You don't have time to play. You can't just cheer for the other teams. I wish you could. But the other teams are trying to win. They're not cheering like you cheering. They want Kamala to win because they want black people to get a shot like they don't want to end this racism thing. You need to want Kamala to win because you're going to move up. You're going to actually become the Nuggets. And if she ain't offering to make you the Nuggets, you have a responsibility to demand that she does. Or you want to be traded. Because that's what the game's about. So when you got Jasmine Crockett bragging about the student loan forgiveness program, because she does a lot of that talking about. What most people don't know is that student loan program, for instance, I wish I could debate her on this. I would love to talk to her. I would love to talk to anybody who wants to have an opportunity on a stage where there's people, where there's an opportunity to put them under. Because see, I know for a fact that $10,000 to $20,000, that ain't help everybody. Not even close to it. And I know I'm gonna have somebody in the comments that goes, it helped me. It wiped out my debt. Well, you know what? You met the criteria. See, $10,000 to $20,000 was all they wiped out when the average student borrows $30,000 or more. And to get that, you had to be paying for 10 years. And if you made over $125,000, you weren't even eligible for the cut. And about 1.6, 1.1, what was it? What's the actual numbers? NBC reports. Okay, so you got, I'm sorry. The Biden administration canceled $167.3 billion worth of student debt. They canceled it. And that sounds like an awful lot of money. I don't care who you are. It is an awful lot of money. But you got to remember what cancel means. I just told you these people were already paying. These people didn't just go get student debt yesterday and then it's like, okay, now it's canceled. No, you had to be paying. The student debt was on the books. 10 years already paid. Half the time, these people done paid up most of the principal. It was over all the interest and still trying to pay off the principal. People have died with student loan on their books. You can't get rid of it in a bank. You can't get rid of it in a bankruptcy. And I just told you it's 10 to 20 grand. If 20 grand, if you got a Pell Grant, and I told you there's criteria, right? And if you make too much, you don't get discharged. But $167 billion still sounds like a whole lot of money, Tim, and I agree with you. It also canceled that, Tim, for 4.7 million borrowers. 4.7 million borrowers had some money cut. Not all canceled. They didn't get money. They were able to stop paying. They were able to stop paying as much. Get it? Stop paying as much. Some are still paying. A lot of them are still paying. In fact, the overwhelming majority of people are still paying. NBC News reports that over 45 million people still hold federal student loan debt. Yeah, so when they say 4.7 million people got reductions, you got to remember 45 million people are still paying. See what Jasmine Crockett's not saying when she's going on and on and on about how great Joe Biden is and how she wish she had a father like Joe Biden. What a disrespectful thing. I wish my child would say some shit like that. 4.7 million borrowers got some relief, but 45 million people are still paying. That $67.3 billion sounded like a whole lot of money till I tell you that still 1.6 trillion is still owed. Which means basically what they did is they cut off about 10% of the debt. And we got people running around acting like they're supposed to name their child after Joe Biden. We got people that weren't impacted by it, but the numbers sound good. They kind of vote for him because they say, well, he did do something about the student loan debt. I mean, it didn't help me. It didn't help my cousins or my sisters or my brothers. But somebody black got help, or somebody poor got help, or somebody Asian, Latino, or white, or working class, or whatever. Somebody got some help. And what I'm telling you, yeah, somebody did. About 10% of the people that needed it got help. 10%. And that's not enough for them to have their chest all the way out. That ain't enough for Jasmine Crockett to be on every one of these shows. That's not enough for Roland Martin to get loud and yell and call people dumb in simple assignments. 10% ain't enough. We just got a clip of Steve Harvey going in. Was he going in on Dr. Umar or something? Because Dr. Umar said, hey, man, maybe you took some money. I think you took some money. Because they offered Dr. Umar 10 grand. He's like, what they offer y'all? Probably offered y'all 10 grand. Y'all took it. Steve was like, nah, I won't even get out of bed for $10,000. Yeah, I wish I would get out of bed for $10,000. Steve Harvey don't do nothing for $10,000. You know what? We shouldn't do nothing for 10%. Black America should not get out of bed for 10%. And you know what? Let's just go ahead and say what it is. Only about 30% of us graduate from college. We had the lowest graduation rate. We end up with more debt, but we don't graduate. We don't all get that paper at the end of the day because we couldn't afford it. Remember, this is student loan debt cancellation. This ain't up front. More people get to go to college. More people get to go. Some people have already been paying. So to pay back a debt, most of us had to stay in college to create the debt. You understand what I'm saying? So if Steve Harvey can fix his mouth to say, I don't get out of bed for $10,000, Black America should not get out to the polls for Joe Biden or for Kamala Harris, in this case, Kamala Harris, for 10%. Knowing damn well we probably represent maybe 2.5% of the 10% of the people that got relief. But it sounds good because you start with the huge numbers. You say $1.67 billion. What was it? That's crazy, Tim Black. Yeah. 167. I can't even say it. $167.3 billion. Canceled. Not giving people money. Canceled. Meanwhile, $1.6 trillion is still on the books, still old. People still got to pay it. This is not bragging rights. So what I'm saying, a lot of what's going on with the Democratic Party, folks, is smoke and mirrors. It is lies. It is exaggerations. I'm tired of my people getting lied to. I'm tired of my people getting lied to and the media covering it up and not telling the truth. Why isn't Joy Reid reporting this? Why isn't Whoopi going off on this? Where's Sunny Hostin when you need her? If you vote for a party 90% of the time, you should be able to make demands of that party and don't want to hear shit. I don't want to hear. You can't do it. That's when you camp outside. Whoever, if you say Joe Manchin or whoever it is not going along with the program, they're being a problem, and we can't get our legislation done because of Joe Manchin. I expect you to be camped out in West Virginia on his doorstep with a whole news crew sitting there with you and holding a press conference on a weekly basis. That's what you're supposed to do. I have never heard anybody have a rebuttal that made any sense to that argument. Because that's what I would do if I really wanted something done. When you want something done and somebody's in the way you're doing it, you confront them. Did Biden ever confront Joe Manchin? Did Kamala confront Joe Manchin? Why would they? If they did, why is it a secret? Where are the cameras at? Since they're holding up his agenda. Now we get to hear for 4 years, and Trump out of power, daily Trump negative news. When the person that they said was stopping all the great things from happening is another Democrat or two, Kristen Sinema. Why you camp out at her house? Biden could have went down to West Virginia. Kamala could have went to Arizona and dealt with Sinema. And if you can't do that, what good are you? If you can't do that, you ain't black.
They have finally admitted something about the black voter, which we've been talking about this literally forever. But in The Guardian, they had posted an article, as you can see on the screen, Black U.S. voting bloc composed of 5 distinct political groups, a survey find. Now, we've been talking about that we all don't think the same. We've been saying we're not a monolith. Now they have to literally admit it now. But let's get into what they say is the 5 distinct political groups in Black America. Now, for years, they always tried to lump us in this one voting block, but this national survey found that they can be defined by specific clusters: legacy civil rights, which we know who they are, secular progressives, the vote blue no matter who, next generational traditionalist, rightful cynical, and race neutral conservative. And so these clusters indicate that there are incredible differences within the Black community in terms of how people think about democracy and their role in our democracy. According to Katrina Gamble, she's the CEO of Sojourn Strategies, and said during the press conference on Wednesday, and they say out of the 2,034 registered voters and 918 Black unregistered voters surveyed, 41% of respondents were found to be legacy civil rights voters who skewed older than 50 years old of age and had the highest voter turnout rates. Legacy civil rights voters were also the most likely group to believe that their vote has the power to drive change. And so on the other end, the rightfully cynical, 22%, and say respondents were the youngest cohort and the least likely to vote, and say based on their personal experiences of racism at work and with the police, and say this cluster was the least likely to believe that their vote matters. Now, next generational traditionalists, as 18% of respondents, were the most religious and least educated cluster, mostly consisting of millennial and Gen Z voters. And so they had a low voter turnout rate and a moderate belief in the power of the vote. The most progressive respondents fell within the secular progressive cluster at 12%, of which the majority were educated women. You want to pay attention to that. And so your secular progressives was mostly educated women who were highly likely to vote. And finally, the race neutral conservative, it says 7% of the respondents consisted mostly of men. And were the second oldest cohort as well, as they had the most conservatives. So race neutral conservatives had a moderate voter turnout rate and were likely to blame systemic barriers on individual choices. So that's how they broke it all down. So you got the civil rights generation, they got the secular progressives, you got the next generation traditionalists, you have the race neutral conservative out there, and then you have the rightful cynical. That's the 5 that they have broken down. Seems about right. Now, in the Pew Research, which we go ahead and put this up on the screen. Now, they did a recent one on the 22nd of August, and it says black voters support Harris over Trump and Kennedy by a wide margin. But see, here's the problem. Here is the major problem. If y'all don't understand what this saying here, and if this, let's say if this was accurate to the core with Black America, Harris would lose this election. Democrats need 80% of the black vote, 80+% of the black vote to win any election. If black people going to do 77% right here for Harris, 77%, okay, and that's overall, she loses the election. Now with black men, 73% to 16%, black women, 79 to 10, then you got 18 to 49, 68 to 19. That's where you get your 19, almost 20% for Trump. If Trump was to get 20% of the black vote, she lose. Bottom line. The 50 plus, 86% Harris, 6% Trump. And then you look at the college degree people, 84% to 7%, then 74% to 15%. Okay. So then you go over here, look at Kennedy and all of that. And so it's very low on that side. And the problem for the Democrat Party now is they don't know how to reach all of them. They probably can do very well at the legacy civil rights. They can do very well with the secular progressive. Obviously, that's why they always talk about abortion all day, the secular progressive. And that's why a lot of women, you know, at least some of these black women, a lot of these educated black women, right, they're going to vote Kamala Harris because that's more so. And I'm not saying all educated black women. I'm not saying all, because you got some educated black women and don't like her behind. It's just bottom line. But she's in trouble. She's in trouble. Now, she got maybe a little bit more voters than Biden would have had, but she's in trouble with that 77%. And when we telling them, look, and then the worst thing you're going to do is what happened in California. Now, your legacy civil rights generation, they cool with not getting nothing, right? Even your secular progressives are cool with not getting nothing for the people. But when you look at the next generation traditionalists, when you look at definitely the cynicals, when you look at the race, they say, according to them, race neutral conservative. I don't know why they say race neutral conservative, because no matter if a person's a quote unquote conservative, race is always in your face, no matter what. But let's just go on what they're saying here. They want something. And these other groups may not want anything. And that's where the split of the black vote is happening, because you got people like myself that want policies for Black America. You got people like myself that's saying, look, I'm going to vote against blue no matter who, because of what this stunt you pulled in California last weekend. And you thought nobody was watching. Now, word out of California is a lot of them Democrat politicians just don't understand why everybody blowing up about what happened in California. They say, you don't even live here. Why are they saying anything? Because what you do in California is a clear message of what's happening in the Democrat Party overall. And like the sister said, you're going to hurt your little friend politically with voting. You're going to hurt your little friend in November, because we're going to remember this. Kind of like what Felicia said, I'm going to remember this. And that's really how a lot of black people are thinking. I'm going to remember this, Democrats. So this 77%, that's now. Wait till after that debate next week. Do the polling then. Do the polling next week after that debate, and let's see where it's at. Because she had to reluctantly agree to the muting of the mics. She didn't want that. And I don't know why she didn't want it, because usually the muting of the mics is actually better for them, right? But for some reason, she didn't want the mics muted. And that's just really what it is. Now, she's on pace to lose this election. Unless Trump just do something so bonehead. Unless he do something so bonehead that people say, all right, man, all right. But for me, like I said, in good conscience, I'm not voting for Democrats because the stunt they pulled on my people in California, I can't do that. I feel like I'm selling out at that point by voting Democrats. I believe in vote against blue, no matter who. What is that? When you go in the voter booth, you vote for anybody else other than blue. If you don't want to vote for anybody else, vote for yourself. If there's a Democrat running unopposed, vote for yourself. They're still voting against blue, no matter who. So you have no excuse about why you say you can't vote. We also say we need everybody on hands on deck. We need everybody off the couch because what they pulled in California, we got to make a statement and you got to get off them couches, get registered to vote. And I say get involved with early voting because listen, we got to send a message to the Democrats. They say they have played games with Black America for way too long, and it is time for them to start losing a bunch of elections. Now, we know they got some in our community that's going to vote for them because they don't care about getting anything. As long as they keep petting them on the head like I'm doing on this microphone, as long as they're petting them on the head and they hear me, you know what I'm saying? Well, man, a dog can hear you. You know, that's not really a whole lot. You hear me? I mean, right? So, ladies and gentlemen, until the Democrats give us something, then they're going to continue to have a time. This is why their strategy is let's flood the zone with migrants and let's get them amnesty, which Nancy Pelosi just talked about that recently on Bill Maher about she wanted them basically all to have amnesty. Why? So they can go vote for them because if they make them, legal to vote, then they can say, forget the black vote. We ain't worrying about y'all. We only go focus on these group of people, right? But every time that you try to do things against God's children, every single time, it blows up in your face. Every single time. And it's going to happen this time, too. You thought you was going to do God's children any kind of way. See, the Democrats, they always mess up. If they'd have done reparations to California, Kamala Harris would have been good right now. And if Gavin Newsom say, I'm signing this bill because the Democrat Party believe in reparations, we believe in, was doing what's right and correcting the past. And if Kamala would have followed up and said it, she would easily won the election. Easily won the election. Because if Gavin Newsom would have did that in California and she would have said that, I say, you know what? I think I'm gonna have to vote for Vice President Kamala Harris because we gotta get these reparations. But the stunt they pull ain't happening. It's not happening. But with 77%, she will lose the election. You better believe that. Remember, they got to have 80% of the black vote, 80% to win any election nationally. So she's in trouble. Like I said, she's in trouble. And it's the Democrats' fault. Why? Because after that big old Hollywood convention they had in Chicago, she should have been leaps and bounds over Trump. Leaps and bounds. And she's still struggling. Came and do an interview without Tim Walz sitting there like he's her support bear or something. Right? I mean, this election is going down quick. I mean, look how quick these days are passing, ladies and gentlemen. Look how quick. And she's still not doing interviews. She's still not doing press conferences. She just thinks she's going to, ski-wee herself.
Vibe to it. I've never seen this many people come out and say that they're not in support of the Democratic Party. In fact, it was almost like it was against our religion. Me being a black man, at least, not being Democrat, black, yeah, you kicked out of the culture, so to speak. But it's a wrap for Kamala, man. Black women ain't rocking with her like that.
If you elected president, would you sign that bill if it came across your desk?
When I am elected president, I will sign that
Pull the plug, y'all. Democrat Party, y'all need to pull the plug on this candidate. Y'all need to put somebody else in her place because she is embarrassing y'all out here in these streets. For you to sit there and lie about something when you know goddamn well you're not going to do it, when you already said that you're not going to do anything for Black people. Ain't that what she said? I'm not going to do anything just for Black people. No. Ain't that what the fuck she said?
I'm so tired of the Black community and y'all low standards. The standards are so low. You are so low in your standards that even in your vote, you have Russians and Ukrainians and people from all these different countries coming in. They're getting trade jobs. They're starting businesses. They're buying houses on the block. They've been here for 10 years and we're scrambling to the top. We just want to see somebody that look like us and be good. Oh, she looked like us. That works. Oh, she looked like me. She's Black. First of all, she's not, but I ain't even gonna go there with you. For your sake, for your peace and comfort, yeah, she's Black. But guess what? She don't give a damn about you. She didn't petition for nothing regarding the Black community since she's been up there. But you know what, Kirk Franklin? Pull up, because you know we ain't really been doing that for 3 years. Go ahead, pull up and sing, dance.
You know what's weird? Is when a lot of you Democrats always saying that if you let Trump in, he's gonna take women's rights away from us. Because when I clearly remember, you Democrats have been trying to take our women's rights away from them by allowing men in women's spaces, by allowing men to compete in women's sports, by allowing a man to become Woman of the Year, by allowing a man to win Miss America, whatever, Miss Universe, whatever it won, by allowing men to be on CoverGirl commercials, putting tampons in boys' bathrooms, wanting men to go in women's bathrooms. Y'all are literally trying to erase a woman on your side, and y'all talking about our rights are being taken away by Donald Trump.
She's not confident. I don't think that she is the leader that we need for America. I'm sorry. We need somebody strong that can get the job done. And we need somebody that's intimidating, that don't take no, that ain't playing no games with people. And she's just not it.
You guys are saying Kamala is our representation of our first Black female president. I don't ever want to argue with you niggas about my Blackness.
This whole lifetime I've been Black. I've been around nothing but Black people. I've been in nothing but Black communities. I've worked nothing but Black ass jobs. I am telling you, if she did so much for us, I wouldn't have to do my homework. I wouldn't have to Google it. I wouldn't have to look it up because I'm Black. I would be living the benefits of her doing the work on behalf of me. That's how that goes.
Why do Black people get upset when they find other Black people supporting Trump? They get so disturbed, so upset. We don't get upset when you guys continue to vote Democrat, who has absolutely ignored you. Every 4 years you vote them in, they promise you that they're going to change your conditions, and they never do, and you guys continue to give them chances. Nobody's upset with you guys that you guys continue to rally behind Sleepy Joe, who said he didn't want his kids to go to school with monkeys, but you love calling Donald Trump racist. Nobody's complaining that you guys are rallying behind Kamala Harris because visually you see her as Black, but she doesn't even identify as Black, only when it's convenient to get the Black vote. She ain't one of y'all.
And the sad part of it all is when you're being told to ask questions, you get condemned for that. Seriously. You had Ice Cube, a video resurfaced of him 4 years ago when he was saying we need to basically stop letting these candidates just come in there and flash some twerk. He didn't say this, I'm paraphrasing, but flash this twerking and flash all this hoopla and I'm Black and whoop all in your face, shape shifting, but they never give you anything for your vote. And all he said is we need to question the intentions of these people running for president and what their vote is going to be. Let me switch the screen. So we're going how to add, you know what I'm saying? As far as Kamala go, I do not like the fact that it's because I'm Black, I'm almost like being painted in this light that I'm going against my skin color, or I'm going against my own, and I'm abandoning my people, when that's really not the case. I'm just thinking for myself. And is it so bad to do so? Honestly? But that woman pointed out something that I wanted to talk about. It's an extreme frustration at this point. When somebody tells me that they're voting for Kamala Harris, of course I have my bias, of course I have my disagreement, but in no way, shape, or form do I harbor any real resentment towards this person. Sure, I may have an opinion about that belief, but I'm not like, oh, you know, this person is woo woo woo. But you tell somebody you support Trump, you tell anybody you support Donald Trump, oh my gosh, bro. You tell, like, I get messages every single day about people trying to convert me over to be, a liberal. Oh, you know, Trump is this, Trump is that, Trump is this, Trump is that, Trump is this, Trump is that. And I sit back and I go, y'all, do you ever notice that we're not doing this to y'all? Like, we're not the ones out here like, hey, you need to support Trump. Look, oh, you still support Kamala? Look, it's like, all right, well, look, if you're willing to have a conversation, we'll have it. But yeah, man, I'm tired of everybody just falling for these hooplas. This woman only subscribed to being black when it's convenient. Other than that, she's been running as an Indian American, even Asian American. I seen at one point. Somebody said, "Thank you, goddess, for rocking with the Kings." On this note, we gotta wake up. For sure. Show me where she plans to tax everyone. So yeah, please vote resist. They won't blue. Yeah, Cornell West. Somebody says, so yeah, these comments are sort of everywhere. Straight up, sisters, very well. We love y'all. But I will say these women have spoke up. They said, look, we're not going for this. All right. Yeah, I'm not going to just sit here and stereotype me into a vote. That's not how this is going to go. I'm actually going to think. Somebody says reparations are one of our goals. It ain't mine. It ain't mine. Great video. I hope more people open their eyes and not fall for the same traps. Unfortunately, we know that some people wearing them sunglasses. Anyhow, this is a message to Kamala Harris from real black women. Quote, we were freed on January 1st, 1863. You're not going to control us. You're not going to bully us into voting for whomever you select. We're not going to do what you say. Those days are over. End quote. Spot on. Let's check this clip out, y'all.
I have a message to the Democrat Party and to Kamala Harris. And this is a message from real black women. We were freed on January 1st of 1863. Therefore, you're not going to control us. You're not going to bully us into voting for whomever you select for your own personal gain. We're not going to do what you say because we're afraid of you. Those days are over. But I also wanted to specifically address what you're doing with Kamala Harris. First of all, most of us do not care what her race is. You could have promoted her as just a good candidate, but the fact that you're promoting her as the black woman candidate, that makes people that are intelligent, that makes us pause and say, okay, so what? She's the black female. Tell me something about what she's going to do for my community, for my family, and for my country. If you can't do that, then you've made a great mistake. You have lost half of us who are intelligent enough to know that the president of the United States must be able to sit across a table from Vladimir Putin, Kim Jong-un, from whomever the new prime minister is, or president of Iran, and from Yi from China. You have to have those qualities. Therefore, you cannot be afraid to have an interview before a favorable news network like NBC, CBS, CNN, ABC, and all of the rest of them. If you are afraid to have an interview, my major concern is what is Putin going to do with you or to you and to the United States? Those are the things that are important to us. Then let's go down the line. Again, if you are a real presidential candidate, we want to know about issues, policies that will affect us, things that you messed up in the last 3.5 years. We want to know today, you have 2 months. Today, how are you going to fix the prices of food in grocery stores? I don't like using the term inflation because most people don't even know what that means. But you know what? Everybody knows what it means, how expensive eggs are. That, you know, she was making these comments about using hot sauce. How expensive? Louisiana hot sauce, I can't afford to buy it anymore because it's gone up. It's like tripled in price or something. It's crazy. Those are the things that we're interested in. We also want to know illegal immigration, what you have done to the border, and why have you done it to the border? You were the border czar, but now we see an influx of illegal immigrants, military-aged men. We see what is going on in Colorado. We know that the prisons in Venezuela were emptied and they were told to go to the United States. We see what that has done to our cities. And we want to know, why did you let that happen? We want to know what's happened with child trafficking, drug trafficking, human trafficking on the border when everybody has free reign. Those are the issues that are important to American Black women, okay? Real Black women who are free, who do not care what race you are. They could have put you out here and never said anything about race. But if you told me, yes, we've made mistakes in the last 3.5 years, but I promise you in the next month, we're going to get the price of eggs down. Next month, we're going to stop illegal immigration before the election. Show us what you can do before the election comes. Let me see what you have. It's like, okay, don't just talk your talk. You better walk your walk. Do it right now while you're the vice president. Therefore, some of us can follow you. And then the other thing, all of the efforts that you're making, that the Democrat Party is making to make you pretend to be a Black woman, they're insulting. The fact that you have to change your diction when you go from place to place, insulting. I've spoken, I don't know where, how many different places. It never has occurred to me to speak differently before different crowds of people. Now, if you're intelligent, you're going to speak intelligently. I don't care where you're speaking. And to assume that you have to talk down to Black people is insulting to all Black people. You don't have to talk down to us. You don't have to get somebody on stage dancing and twerking to relate to us. Grown people, you can talk to us like grown people. And you know what? It doesn't matter what race. We don't care. But I just wanted to say this to the Democrat Party. You've made mistakes with this candidate. And I want you to know that the Black women of America, those of us who are free, we recognize your mistakes.
So as you can see, as she wrote, people are sick of being used by an administration that cares about no one. Honestly, man, you would think that by this time they would have something better in place to say, hey, we can at least do a little something to give the illusion that we care, but they won't even do that. And the people can see right through the lies, man. These women, powerful women right here. And I'm so happy that they were able to shine their lights. And somebody said, this is the kind of energy that makes history books blush. Keep shining, queens. I know that's right. That's a practical and rational thinker right there. No mental illness and no lies. This is all correct. And just, and just compare this woman to Kamala. How the hell will we choose some weirdo laughing hyena to be the first female president?
Go figure. Follow me.